My son was seconds away from saying "I do" to a woman the world thought was an angel. The room was filled with applause, champagne, and the scent of expensive lilies. But then I dropped my spoon. It was a small, clumsy mistake that saved a life. When I bent down to pick it up under the white linen tablecloth, I entered a different world. My 8-year-old grandson Leo was trembling in the dark, clutching the hem of my trousers like a lifeline. He didn't speak. He just pressed a crumpled, grease-stained napkin into my palm. The message was written in shaky blue crayon, but the words hit me harder than a wrecking ball. She put the blue stuff in my water again. Help me. I didn't just stop the wedding. I started a war. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Like and subscribe if you would burn down the world to protect your grandchild. My name is Caleb Jefferson. I am 69 years old, and for 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer in Chicago. My job was to find the cracks in the foundation before the building collapsed. I learned to look past the fresh paint and the fancy facades to see where the stress fractures were hiding. And standing there in that ballroom, surrounded by 300 of Chicago's elite, I was looking at the biggest stress fracture of my life. Everyone else saw a fairy tale. They saw my son Trayvon, a successful black architect, marrying Victoria, a beautiful blonde pharmacist with a smile that could light up a room. They saw a modern, blended family. They saw Victoria leaning down to wipe a crumb off my grandson Leo's face, cooing at him like the perfect mother figure. But I was watching closely. I saw her thumb dig into the soft flesh of Leo's arm. I saw the way his little body went rigid, not with love, but with terror. I saw the flash of cruelty in her blue eyes that vanished the second she stood up to smile for the photographer. I stood at the edge of the room, feeling like a stranger at my own son's wedding. Trayvon had drifted away from me since his first wife, Leo's mother, passed away 3 years ago. Grief had made him vulnerable, and Victoria had walked right into that open wound. She was perfect, too perfect. She organized his life, she managed his schedule, and she took over the care of Leo, who had been sickly and asthmatic since birth. But lately, Leo wasn't just sickly. He was fading. His skin was gray, his eyes were sunken, and he flinched whenever Victoria moved her hand too quickly. Trayvon didn't see it. He was blinded by love. Or maybe he was just relieved to have someone sharing the burden of raising a special needs child. He looked at Victoria like she was his savior. I looked at her and saw a demolition crew disguised as a renovation project. The reception was in full swing. The best man had just finished a toast about how Victoria was a blessing to the Jefferson family. I was seated at the head table, right next to Leo. He was sitting on a booster seat, his legs swinging nervously. He hadn't touched his food. His breathing was wheezy, that familiar rattle that had sent us to the emergency room 3 times in the last month. Victoria reached over and adjusted his collar. "Eat your dinner, sweetie," she said, her voice loud enough for the table to hear. "You need your strength." Leo looked down at his plate. I saw his hand shaking as he reached for his water glass. The liquid inside looked clear, but he hesitated. Victoria nudged his elbow. "Drink up, Leo. It is just water." That was when I knocked my spoon off the table. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, a sharp metallic sound that cut through the murmur of conversation. "Oops," I muttered, shifting in my chair. "Let me get that." I ducked under the long, heavy tablecloth. It was like entering a cave. The noise of the party was muffled instantly. Down there, in the semi-darkness, I saw Leo's legs. He wasn't swinging them anymore. He was shaking. His little knees were knocking together. I reached for the spoon, and I felt a small, cold hand grab my wrist. I looked up. Leo had slid down in his chair so his face was level with the table edge. His eyes were wide, filled with a primal panic that no 8-year-old should ever know. He didn't say a word. He knew better. He just pressed that balled-up napkin into my hand and squeezed my fingers tight, just for a second. Then he let go and pulled his hand back, as if he was afraid of being burned. I stayed under the table for a few seconds longer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. I unfolded the napkin. The wax of the crayon was thick and hurried. She put the blue stuff in my water. Help me. The blue stuff. I didn't know what it was, but I knew what I had seen. I had seen Leo get sicker and sicker every day since Victoria moved in. I had seen the way he looked at his juice boxes with suspicion. I had seen the way he only ate food that came from sealed packages. I crawled back out from under the table. The noise of the room assaulted me. Laughter, clinking glasses, music. It all sounded grotesque now. I looked at the water glass in front of Leo. It was sitting there, innocent and deadly. Victoria was busy laughing at something Trayvon had whispered in her ear, her hand resting possessively on the back of Leo's neck. My blood ran cold, then hot, boiling hot. I am a man of science. I deal in physics, in load-bearing walls, in concrete facts. But in that moment, I operated on pure instinct. I didn't think about the scene I was about to cause. I didn't think about my reputation or my relationship with my son. I thought about the structural integrity of my family and how it was about to collapse if I didn't act. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I grabbed the water glass in front of Leo. "Hey, Dad?" Trayvon looked up, his smile faltering. "You okay?" I didn't answer him. I looked at Victoria. She locked eyes with me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. She knew. She knew that I knew, and she didn't look scared. She looked challenged. I raised the glass and hurled it against the wall. The sound of shattering glass silenced the room instantly. The music cut out. 300 faces turned toward the head table. "Stop it!" I bellowed, my voice cracking with a rage I hadn't felt since I fought in Vietnam. "This wedding is over." "Dad?" Trayvon stood up, his face flushing with embarrassment. "What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? She is poisoning him." I pointed a shaking finger at Victoria. "She is trying to kill your son, Trayvon. Look at him. Look at the boy." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Flashes started going off. This was the drama everyone secretly craved, but nobody expected it to be this dark. Victoria didn't scream. She didn't get angry. She did something much more dangerous. She started to cry. It was a masterful performance. Her lower lip trembled, her eyes filled with tears, and she shrank into Trayvon's side, looking like a fragile flower being attacked by a madman. "Oh my God," she sobbed, burying her face in Trayvon's chest. "Trayvon, I told you. I told you his dementia was getting worse. He doesn't know what he is saying." "Dementia!" I roared. I stepped over the spilled chair, moving toward her. "I don't have dementia, you witch. I have eyes. Leo told me. He told me about the blue stuff." I reached into my pocket to pull out the napkin, the proof. But before I could, Trayvon shoved me. My own son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had put through architecture school. He put his hands on my chest and shoved me hard enough that I stumbled back and hit the wall. "That is enough," Trayvon screamed, his veins bulging in his neck. "You are ruining the happiest day of my life. You are jealous because I'm happy. You have been hateful to Victoria since the day you met her. Trayvon, listen to me," I pleaded, trying to regain my balance. "Read the note. Just read the note." I tried to show him the napkin, but he slapped my hand away. The napkin fluttered to the floor, landing near the spilled water and broken glass. In the chaos, a waiter stepped on it, grinding the evidence into the wet floor. "Get him out of here," Trayvon yelled at the security guards. "Get him out before I do something I regret." Two large men in black suits grabbed my arms. I struggled, not because I wanted to stay at the party, but because I couldn't leave Leo. I looked at my grandson. He was frozen in his chair, tears streaming down his face, his mouth open in a silent scream. He looked at me with absolute despair. I had failed him. I had tried to save him, and instead, I had left him alone with the monster. "Leo!" I shouted as they dragged me backward. "Don't drink anything she gives you. Do you hear me? Only drink from the tap. Trayvon, wake up! She is killing him!" The guests parted like the Red Sea, staring at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. I could hear their whispers. "Crazy old man. He's lost it. Poor Trayvon. Poor Victoria." They didn't see what I saw. They saw an angry, aggressive black man ruining a nice white lady's wedding. They saw the stereotype, not the truth. As the guards hauled me toward the double doors, I looked back one last time. Trayvon was holding Victoria, comforting her, stroking her hair. But Victoria wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me over his shoulder. And she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a cold, razor-sharp expression that chilled my marrow. It was a declaration of war. That smile said, "You tried, old man. You failed. Now he is mine." The doors slammed shut in my face, cutting off the view of my family. I was thrown out onto the sidewalk of Michigan Avenue, the cold Chicago wind biting through my tuxedo. I stood there, panting, my heart feeling like it might give out. I adjusted my jacket. I smoothed my tie. I am Caleb Jefferson. I build things that withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. My son might have thrown me out. The world might think I am crazy, but I knew the truth. That woman wasn't a mother. She was an assassin, and she had made one fatal mistake. She had left me alive. I reached into my pocket and realized with a sinking feeling that the napkin was gone. It was back there on the floor, destroyed. I had no proof. I had no access. I had nothing but my word against the word of a beautiful, grieving bride. But as I watched the snow start to fall on the city streets, I made a vow. I would tear that marriage apart brick by brick if I had to. I would find out who Victoria really was, and I would get my grandson back before the blue stuff finished the job. I walked to the parking lot, my mind already working like a blueprint, mapping out the angles, calculating the loads. If I couldn't go through the front door, I would find a side entrance. If Trevon wouldn't listen to me, I would make him see. I got into my truck and sat in the silence. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Trevon. "Do not come near us. You are dead to me. Do not contact Victoria. Do not try to see Leo. If you come near my house, I will get a restraining order." I stared at the screen. My own son. The grief was a physical weight in my chest, heavy and suffocating, but I pushed it down. There was no time for grief. Grief is a luxury for people who aren't fighting for a life. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I was going to war. I drove to the hospital where my old friend Dr. Cohen worked. He was a man who owed me a favor or two. I needed to know what kind of poison turned water blue. I needed to know what I was up against. As I drove through the city, I thought about Leo's eyes. The fear in them, the trust. He had given me that note because he believed I could save him. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned gray. "Hang on, Leo," I whispered to the empty cab of my truck. "Grandpa is coming, and I'm bringing the sledgehammer." The internet is a courtroom where the verdict is delivered before the trial even begins. I learned this the hard way less than 24 hours after I was thrown out of my son's wedding. I was sitting in my study, surrounded by blueprints and silence, when my phone started buzzing incessantly. It wasn't calls, it was notifications. I opened a link sent by a concerned neighbor. It was a live stream. There sat Victoria, looking like a shattered porcelain doll. She was wearing a simple gray sweater, no makeup, her blonde hair messy in a way that looked accidental, but was likely calculated down to the strand. She was crying. Not the ugly, heaving sobs of real grief, but the silent, singular tears that track perfectly down a pale cheek. She was telling the world about me. "I just wanted a family," she whispered to the camera, her voice breaking. "I wanted to be a mother to Leo. I wanted to love Trevon. But his father..." She paused, shuddering. "He is a violent man. He has always hated me. He thinks I am not good enough for his son. Yesterday he tried to attack me. He threw glass. He screamed at a terrified little boy. We are so scared. We don't know what he will do next." I watched the view count tick up. 5,000, 10,000. The comments rolled in like a tidal wave of sewage. "Someone needs to put that old man in a home. Call the police. Protect that angel. He is dangerous." I sat there, a 69-year-old man who had built skyscrapers that defined the Chicago skyline, and felt my reputation crumbling into dust. She was playing the oldest card in the deck, the fragile white woman threatened by the angry black man. She knew exactly what buttons to push. She knew that, in the court of public opinion, her tears outweighed my 40 years of hard work and integrity. Then came the final blow. Trevon called. I answered on the first ring, desperate to hear his voice, desperate to explain. "Dad," he said, his voice cold and flat. "Trevon, listen to me. She is manipulating you. Stop, Caleb." He didn't call me Dad. He called me Caleb. "Do not go near Leo. Do not go near Victoria. I am blocking this number. If you show up at our house, I will have you arrested for trespassing. You are toxic, and I will not let you poison my son." The line went dead. I tried to call back, straight to voicemail. I tried to text, not delivered. I sat in the dark, the silence of my large, empty house pressing in on me. They thought they had won. Victoria thought she had cut off the supply line. She thought she had isolated the enemy. She was making a critical error in judgment. She thought Trayvon was the prize. She thought my son, the successful architect, held the keys to the kingdom. She looked at his designer suits and his luxury car and saw a gold mine. She didn't know about the trust. When Leo's mother died 3 years ago, she left a life insurance policy. I matched it, dollar for dollar, and added my own savings from a lifetime of engineering patents. There is $5 million sitting in a trust fund for Leo. It is enough to send him to any university in the world, enough to set him up for life. And here is the secret that kept me calm as I watched Victoria weep on screen. Trayvon doesn't control that money. I do. I am the sole trustee. I hold the keys. Victoria was performing for a crowd, thinking she was securing the bag, but she was digging for gold in a mine I had already sealed shut. She wouldn't see a dime of that money, not unless she went through me. For a week, I lived in purgatory. I watched from a distance. I hired a private investigator to watch the house, but he couldn't get close. They had hired security. Victoria was milking the victim narrative for everything it was worth. Then, the call came. It wasn't Trayvon. It was the scanner I kept on my desk, tuned to the local emergency frequencies. Ambulance requested. 8-year-old male, severe respiratory distress, status critical. The address was Trayvon's. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I grabbed my keys and drove. I broke every speed limit in the city. My hands were shaking, not with age, but with a terrifying familiarity. I knew what an asthma attack looked like. I knew the panic in a child's eyes when the air simply stops coming. I beat the ambulance to the hospital by 2 minutes. I stood by the emergency bay doors, hidden in the shadows of the parking garage. I watched them unload the stretcher. Leo was small, too small. He had an oxygen mask over his face, his chest heaving with terrifying, shallow gasps. Trayvon was running beside the stretcher, looking pale and useless. Victoria was there too, holding Trayvon's hand, looking distraught. But as they passed under the harsh lights of the entrance, I saw her check her reflection in the sliding glass doors. She smoothed her hair. She was preparing for the next act. I waited until they were inside, then I made my move. I walked into the lobby. The security guard, a man I didn't know, stepped in front of me. "Sir, family only back there." "I am his grandfather," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Jefferson gave us a list. You are explicitly banned from the premises. If you don't leave, I have to call the police." I looked at the guard. I could have snapped him in two in my prime. Even now, I could probably take him. But that wouldn't help Leo. Violence was what Victoria wanted. It would only prove her story. I stepped back. I raised my hands. "Fine," I said. "I'm leaving." I walked out the automatic doors, turned the corner, and walked straight to the employee entrance near the loading dock. I waited. 3 minutes later, a nurse came out for a smoke break. She looked tired. Her scrubs were wrinkled. She lit a cigarette and sighed. Then she looked up and saw me. Her eyes went wide. "Mr. Jefferson?" "Hello, Sarah," I said. "Sarah Miller. 10 years ago, she was a bright kid from the neighborhood with no money for college. I had paid for her nursing degree. I had never asked for a dime back. I only asked that she be a good nurse." "What are you doing here?" she asked, looking around nervously. "I heard about the wedding. Everyone is talking about it. My grandson is in there, Sarah. They won't let me see him. I need to know he is alive." She bit her lip. "Caleb, I can't. I could lose my job." "I'm not asking you to sneak me in," I lied. "I just need to know. Please. Just check the charts. Tell me what happened." She looked at my face. She saw the desperation I usually kept hidden behind walls of stoicism. She threw her cigarette down and crushed it with her heel. "Wait here," she whispered. 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. I paced the concrete dock, listening to the hum of the hospital generators. Finally, the door opened. Sarah slipped out. She wasn't holding a chart, but she had a piece of paper in her hand. Her face was pale. "Caleb," she said, her voice shaking. "It is bad." "Is he alive?" "Yes. They stabilized him. He is in the ICU. But Caleb, look at this." She handed me the paper. It was a printout of his blood work upon admission. I am an engineer, not a doctor, but I know how to read data. I know how to look for anomalies. The toxicity report was clean. No poisons, no blue stuff. But then, my finger traced down to the medication levels. Leo has severe asthma. He is supposed to be on daily corticosteroids and a bronchodilator. These drugs stay in the blood. They leave a trace. The levels on the page were 0. Not low, 0. He hasn't had his medication in weeks, Sarah whispered. His lungs were completely shut down. It wasn't a sudden attack. It was withdrawal. Someone stopped giving him his medicine. I stared at the paper. The numbers didn't lie. Concrete doesn't lie. Victoria wasn't poisoning him with something new. She was killing him by withholding the very thing that kept him alive. She was suffocating him slowly, day by day, while playing the doting mother. She checked in on Facebook an hour ago, Sarah said, disgust curling her lip. She posted a photo of her holding his hand. The caption said, "Fighting for my brave boy. Pray for us." She is getting thousands of likes. I crumpled the paper in my fist. She was starving him of air and feeding off the sympathy. It was a sickness I had never seen before. "I need to go in," I said. "Caleb, security is everywhere." "I don't care." I pushed past her. I didn't run. I walked with purpose. I walked like I owned the hospital. I walked through the service corridors, navigating the maze by instinct. I found the ICU. I saw Trayvon sitting in the waiting room, his head in his hands. He looked broken. Good. He needed to be broken before he could be rebuilt. But I didn't stop for him. I went to room 304. I saw Leo through the glass. He was sleeping, a machine breathing for him. He looked so small in that bed. The door opened. I expected a nurse. Instead, Victoria walked out. She was holding a cup of coffee. She saw me. She didn't scream. She didn't call for help. She stopped, and a slow reptilian smile spread across her face. She looked around to make sure the hallway was empty. She walked right up to me. She was close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, a floral scent that barely covered the smell of hospital antiseptic. "You are persistent, Caleb," she said, her voice a low purr. "I know what you are doing," I said, my voice shaking with the effort to keep my hands at my sides. "I saw the blood work. You aren't giving him his medicine." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Prove it." "I will. I will show Trayvon." "Trayvon?" She laughed softly. "Trayvon thinks you are a senile, jealous old man. He thinks I am the only thing holding this family together. If you show him a piece of paper, I will tell him you forged it. Who do you think he will believe? The wife who warms his bed, or the father who ruined his wedding?" She took a step closer. She leaned in, standing on her tiptoes to whisper in my ear. "He is a weak little boy, Caleb. Just like his father. He was never going to make it to adulthood anyway. I'm just speeding up the inevitable." I felt a cold rage settle in my gut, heavy and solid as lead. "You are a monster. And you," she whispered, her breath hot on my ear, "are a ghost. You are already dead to them. Why don't you do us all a favor and make it official? Die, old man. It would save me so much trouble." She pulled back, gave me a bright, fake smile, and patted my cheek. "Security!" she shouted suddenly, her voice pitching up into a scream of terror. "Help! He is here! He is hurting me!" She threw her coffee on herself, the hot liquid staining her gray sweater. She stumbled back, feigning a push. I stood there, frozen, as the sound of running footsteps echoed down the hall. I looked at her, and I didn't see a woman. I saw a structural flaw, a crack in the foundation, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't just patch this. I had to bring the whole house down. I learned a long time ago that you cannot fight a fire with gasoline. I had tried to kick down the front door of my son's life, and they had simply added more locks. I had screamed the truth, and they had called me crazy. If I wanted to save Leo, I had to stop acting like a desperate grandfather and start thinking like an engineer. I needed to find the stress point. I needed to apply pressure where they were weakest, and I knew exactly what Victoria's weakness was. It was the same thing that had brought her into our lives in the first place. Greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. 3 days after the hospital incident, I walked up the driveway of my son's house. It was a beautiful home in the suburbs, a house I had helped pay for, though Trayvon liked to pretend he had done it all himself. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the bile rising in my throat. I had to do the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I had to apologize to the woman who was trying to kill my grandson. I rang the doorbell. I waited. I saw the curtain twitch. They were watching. I adjusted my tie and held the velvet box in my hand so it was clearly visible. Trayvon opened the door. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't invite me in. "What do you want, Caleb?" he asked, blocking the entrance. "I came to apologize, son," I said, forcing my voice to sound old and broken. I lowered my head. I stared at my shoes. I acted every bit the 70-year-old man losing his grip on reality. I was wrong at the hospital. I was scared. Seeing Leo sick like that, it messed with my head. I haven't been sleeping. I think maybe you were right. Maybe I am losing it a little. Trayvon's shoulders dropped. He wanted to believe me. He is my son. He is weak, but he isn't evil. He wanted his father back. I just want to see him, Trayvon, just for a minute. And I wanted to give Victoria a peace offering. I know I ruined her big day. I want to make it right. Victoria appeared behind him. She was wearing a silk robe, looking like the lady of the manor. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me, but then they landed on the black velvet box in my hands. Her gaze sharpened. It was the look of a shark smelling blood in the water. "Let him in, Trayvon," she said softly. I walked into the living room. It was filled with wedding gifts that hadn't been opened. I turned to Victoria. I hated her with every fiber of my being, but I looked her in the eye and I lied. "I am sorry, Victoria," I said. "I was out of line. I want to welcome you to the family properly." I opened the box. Inside was a diamond necklace. It was worth $20,000. It was vintage, platinum, and heavy with stones. I had bought it that morning from a jeweler who owed me a favor. It was beautiful, and it was cold, just like her. Her breath hitched. She reached out and touched the diamonds. She didn't look at me anymore. She only saw the money. She saw the lifestyle she was trying to steal. "It is beautiful, Caleb," she purred. "Thank you. I suppose we can start over." "Can I see Leo?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling. "Just for 10 minutes. I promise I won't cause a scene." Trayvon looked at Victoria. She was already fastening the necklace around her neck, admiring herself in the hallway mirror. She waved her hand dismissively. 10 minutes, she said, but Trayvon stays in the room. That was all I needed. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy. I went into Leo's room. It smelled like sickness. It smelled like Vicks Vapo Rub and stale air. The shades were drawn. Leo was sitting up in bed, propped up by pillows. He looked gray. His breathing was a shallow wheeze. "Hey, little man," I whispered. Leo's eyes widened. He looked at the door, terrified that she would come in. "It is okay," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Dad is right here." Trayvon stood by the door, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. He was guarding the wrong person. I reached into my bag. I brought out a teddy bear. It wasn't new. It was a little worn, the fur matted in places. It was Mr. Barnaby. It had been Trayvon's bear when he was a boy. I had kept it in the attic for 30 years. "I found an old friend of your dad's," I said, handing the bear to Leo. "He gets lonely at my house. I thought he could keep you company." Leo took the bear. He hugged it tight. He looked at Trayvon, and for a second, Trayvon's face softened. He remembered the bear. He remembered the nights I had read him stories with that bear tucked under his arm. It was a nostalgia trap, and Trayvon walked right into it. I leaned in close to Leo to adjust his blanket. I put my mouth right next to his ear. "Don't let go of the bear, Leo," I whispered, so low that Trayvon couldn't hear. "Never let go of the bear. He is watching over you." Leo looked at me. He understood. He squeezed the bear. Inside the left eye of Mr. Barnaby was a high-definition camera lens, smaller than a pinhead. Inside the stuffing was a battery pack that would last for 30 days, and a microphone sensitive enough to hear a pin drop. It was military-grade technology, sourced from a security contractor I had worked with on a government building project. It was a Trojan horse, wrapped in synthetic fur and childhood memories. I stayed for exactly 10 minutes. I told Leo a story about a bridge I built that refused to fall down, no matter how hard the wind blew. I kissed his forehead. His skin was clammy. "Time is up, Dad," Trayvon said. I stood up. I patted Trayvon on the shoulder. "Take care of him, son." I walked out of the house. I didn't look back at Victoria, who was still admiring her reflection. I got into my truck and drove away. But I didn't go far. I drove 3 blocks over, to a side street that had a clear line of sight to the back of their house. I had rented a nondescript utility van. It looked like a plumber's truck. Inside, it was a mobile command center. I parked the van and locked the doors. I turned on the monitors. The feed came to life. It was crystal clear. I could see Leo's room in high definition. The camera was angled perfectly from where Leo held the bear against his chest. I could see the door. I could see the window. I could hear the rasp of his breathing through the speakers. I sat there for hours. I drank coffee that turned cold. I watched my grandson sleep. I watched Trayvon come in to check on him once, tucking the blanket around his shoulders. Trayvon loved him. I could see that. But love without spine is useless. Then, the clock struck 2 in the morning. The house was dark. The street was silent. Chicago in February is a brutal thing. The wind was howling outside, the temperature dropping to 10 degrees below zero. On the monitor, the door to Leo's room opened. It wasn't Trayvon. Victoria walked in. She wasn't wearing the silk robe anymore. She was wearing a thick sweater and gloves. She didn't turn on the light. She moved with the confidence of a predator in its own territory. I leaned forward, my nose almost touching the screen. I held my breath. She walked over to the bed. She looked down at Leo. He was asleep, clutching Mr. Barnaby. She reached out and I flinched, thinking she was going to hit him. But she didn't hit him. She did something far more insidious. She walked over to the window. It was a large, double-hung window that looked out over the backyard. She unlocked it. She slid it open. The wind roared into the room. I could hear it on the microphone, a sudden, violent rushing sound. The curtains whipped around. Snowflakes swirled into the bedroom, landing on the carpet. The temperature in that room would drop to freezing in minutes. For a healthy child, it would be uncomfortable. For an asthmatic child with weakened lungs, cold air is a trigger. It constricts the airways. It is like breathing through a straw while someone sits on your chest. Victoria wasn't done. She walked over to the humidifier that was puffing gentle, warm steam into the air next to the bed. She turned it off. She unplugged it. Then, she walked back to the bed. Leo stirred, shivering in his sleep. He pulled the duvet up to his chin. Victoria reached down. She took the corner of the duvet. She peeled it back. She stripped the heavy winter blanket off his small, trembling body, leaving him in just his thin pajamas. She folded the duvet and placed it on the chair across the room, making it look like he had kicked it off himself in the night. She stood there for a moment, watching him. Leo curled into a tight ball, seeking warmth. He started to cough. It was a dry, hacking cough. The cold air was already hitting his lungs. Victoria smiled. It was the same smile she had given me at the wedding. It was a smile of pure, cold satisfaction. She looked at the shivering boy. Then she looked at the open window, checking her work. She turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her, sealing him in the freezing trap she had set. I sat in the van, shaking. My blood was boiling so hot I thought I might have a stroke. I wanted to drive the van through their front door. I wanted to run up those stairs and throw her out that window. I wanted to kill her. But I forced myself to stay in the seat. I forced my hand away from the door handle. If I went in there now, it was my word against hers. She would say she opened the window to air out the room and forgot. She would say Leo kicked off the blankets. Trayvon would believe her. The police would call it a domestic dispute. I needed more. I needed the pattern. I needed undeniable proof that this wasn't negligence, but attempted murder. I watched Leo shiver on the screen. I watched him cough until he gagged. I watched him reach for the bear, pulling it tight against his chest for warmth. "Hold on, Leo," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Hold on, little man. The bear is watching. Grandpa is watching." I hit the save button on the recording. I had the first brick in the wall of evidence that would become her prison cell. But I knew tonight wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the winter, and I had to let it get colder before I could bring the heat. I watched until dawn. I didn't blink. I didn't sleep. I became a witness. And as the sun rose over the frozen city, I began to formulate the next step of my plan. I needed to know who she really was. I needed to know where she learned to kill without leaving a bruise. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 20 years. "It's Caleb," I said when the voice answered. "I need a ghost. I need you to find someone who doesn't exist." Because Victoria wasn't just a bad stepmother. You don't learn to open windows in sub-zero temperatures by accident. This was a professional hit, executed in slow motion, and I was going to find out how many other children had frozen to death in her care. I sat in the darkness of the surveillance van, watching the recording of Victoria opening that window over and over again. My hands were shaking, but my mind was cold steel. I knew I was looking at a professional. You do not open a window in sub-zero temperatures with that kind of calm precision unless you have done it before. She moved like a surgeon cutting out a tumor. She moved like a woman who knew exactly how to kill without leaving a fingerprint. I pulled the flash drive from the console. This was my evidence, but it was not enough. To the police, it would look like negligence. To child services, it would look like a mistake. To my son, it would look like an accident. I needed more. I needed the pattern. I needed the bodies. I picked up my burner phone and dialed Marcus. Marcus and I served in the Gulf War together. He was a reconnaissance specialist then, and he is the best private investigator in Chicago now. He finds people who do not want to be found. He digs up bones that have been buried under miles of concrete. I need a background check, I said when he answered. I need a deep dive. I am sending you a name and a photo. Her name is Victoria Miller. Give me 24 hours, Caleb Marcus said. His voice was gravel and smoke. If she has a shadow, I will find it. I did not sleep. I went back to my empty house and paced the floor. I watched the live feed from the teddy bear on my phone. Leo was still shivering, but he was alive. Trayvon had come in around 4 in the morning and closed the window, muttering about drafts. He had covered Leo up. He was a good father, but he was sleeping with a viper. 24 hours later, I met Marcus at a diner on the south side. It was a place where we used to eat after long shifts on the construction site back in the day. The coffee was strong and the booths were worn vinyl. Marcus slid a thick manila envelope across the table. He did not look at me. He looked at his coffee cup. "You are not going to like this, Caleb," he said quietly. "Tell me." "Her name isn't Victoria Miller. At least it hasn't been for long. 3 years ago, she was Vanessa Thorne in Ohio. 3 years before that, she was Veronica Tate in Florida. She changes her name every time she moves states. She changes her hair. She changes her history." I opened the folder. There were 3 driver's licenses, 3 different names, the same cold blue eyes staring back at me. In the Florida license, she was a brunette. In Ohio, she was a redhead. Now she was a blonde. She sheds identities like a snake sheds skin. "Why does she move?" I asked, scanning the documents. Marcus took a deep breath. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had seen too much evil in his life. "She leaves when the money runs out, Caleb, or when the heat gets too high." I turned the page. My heart stopped. It literally stopped beating in my chest for a second. I was looking at photographs, not of Victoria, of children. There were 2 of them, a boy and a girl. They were beautiful. They were smiling. "Who are they?" I whispered. "That is Ethan. He was 6. That is Sophie. She was 5. "Are they hers?" "Stepchildren," Marcus said. Ethan was her stepson in Ohio. Sophie was her stepdaughter in Florida. "Where are they now?" Marcus pointed to the next page. It was a copy of a death certificate, then another. Ethan died of accidental drowning in the bathtub. The coroner ruled it a tragic accident. Sophie died of anaphylactic shock. She had a severe peanut allergy. Her EpiPen malfunctioned. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands clenched the paper so hard it tore. "Accidents," I spat. "That is what the police said. But here is the kicker, Caleb. In both cases, the biological fathers were wealthy widowers. In both cases, Victoria married them quickly. And in both cases, the children had massive life insurance policies taken out on them shortly after the wedding. How much? $2 million for the boy, $2 million for the girl, $4 million, Caleb. She cashed out and disappeared 6 months later. The fathers were too broken by grief to fight her. She played the grieving stepmother perfectly. She cried at the funerals. She started foundations in their names. Then she took the money and ran. I looked at the photo of Ethan. He had the same wide, trusting eyes as Leo. I looked at Sophie. She looked frail. "She targets them," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "She finds widowers with vulnerable children. She marries them. She kills the kids for the insurance money, and she moves on. She is a black widow," Marcus said. "But she doesn't kill the husbands. She kills the things they love most because that is where the money is. And she does it in a way that looks like bad luck. A slip in the tub, a faulty medical device, an open window in winter." I slammed my fist on the table. The coffee cups rattled. "She is doing it to Leo," I said. "She is doing it right now. She stopped his medication. She is freezing him out. You need to get him out of there, Caleb," Marcus said. If she is escalating, she won't stop until he is in the ground. She has burned through the 4 million. That is why she is here. That is why she married your son. She needs a new payday. I took the file. I held it to my chest like a shield. I had the ammunition now. I knew what I was fighting. I wasn't fighting a bad mother. I was fighting a serial killer who specialized in children. I drove home with the file on the passenger seat. I wanted to drive straight to the police station, but I stopped myself. The police in Ohio and Florida had cleared her. They had ruled them accidents. If I walked in there with a file put together by a private investigator, they would laugh me out of the room. They would say I was a grieving grandfather, looking for conspiracies. They needed hard evidence of a crime in progress. They needed to catch her red-handed. My phone rang. It was Trayvon. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to him since the hospital. I answered. "Dad." His voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded frantic. "I am here, son. I need money, Dad. I need help." My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What is wrong? Is it Leo?" "He is not getting better, Dad. The doctor's here. They don't know what they are doing. We brought him home, but he is weak. He can barely stand up. Victoria found a clinic." "A clinic?" "Yes, in Switzerland. They have a revolutionary treatment for pediatric asthma. It is experimental, but the success rates are incredible. Victoria has been on the phone with them all morning. They have a spot open, but we need to move fast." Switzerland. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Switzerland was 4,000 miles away. Switzerland was outside the jurisdiction of U.S. courts. Switzerland was a place where an old man couldn't watch from a van parked down the street. If she got him to Switzerland, she would kill him and cremate him before I even knew he was gone. "How much, Trevin?" $50,000. For the deposit and the medical transport. "I don't have it, Dad. You know I don't have that kind of liquid cash. The wedding, the house, I am tapped out. Please, Dad. You are the trustee. You have to release the funds. It is for Leo's life." I closed my eyes. I could hear Victoria in the background. I could hear her fake sobbing. I could hear her whispering to him, "Tell him it is life or death, Trevin. Tell him he has to do it." She was playing him like a fiddle. She knew I had the money. She knew the trust fund was the only thing standing between her and another payday, and she was using my son's love for his child as a weapon against me. She wants to get him alone, I thought. She wants to get him away from the cameras, away from the doctors who might notice the lack of medication in his blood. "Dad, are you there?" Trayvon pleaded. "Please, I am begging you." I took a deep breath. I had to make the hardest decision of my life. If I gave them the money, I was signing Leo's death warrant. If I refused, I was confirming Trayvon's belief that I was a cruel, heartless old man. I opened my eyes. I looked at the file on the seat next to me. I looked at the picture of Ethan, the boy who drowned in a bathtub. "No," I said. "What?" "No, Trayvon. I am not giving you $50,000. There was a silence on the line, a silence so heavy it felt like it would crush the phone. "You are joking," Trayvon whispered. "This is my son. This is your grandson. You would let him die to spite Victoria." "It is not about spite," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He is not going to Switzerland. He is too sick to travel. He needs to be in a hospital here in Chicago where I can see him." "You don't get to see him," Trayvon screamed. "You lost that right when you attacked my wife. You are evil, Caleb. You are a selfish, evil old man. Victoria was right about you. You care more about your money than you care about your family." "Trayvon, listen to me. It is a trick. You rot in hell, Dad. Do not ever call me again. If Leo dies, his blood is on your hands." The line went dead. I sat in my truck parked in my driveway, and I wept. I wept for my son who was so lost. He couldn't see the wolf in his own bed. I wept for the cruelty of what I had just done. I had denied a father money to save his child. But I knew I was right. Switzerland was the end game. Switzerland was the final act. She wanted to take him to a foreign country where an accidental death on a mountain or a reaction to a new medication would be easy to explain. She wanted to isolate him. She wanted to remove the bear. I wiped my face. I hardened my heart. I couldn't be the grieving father right now. I had to be the engineer. I had to look at the structure and see the failure points. She was desperate. That call proved it. She needed money. She needed to move Leo. She was accelerating the timeline. My refusal would make her angry. It would make her reckless. She wouldn't give up on the money. She would just find another way to get it. And she would use Trayvon to do it. I picked up the file again. I looked at Victoria's aliases. I needed to know more about her past. I needed to know if there were other survivors, other husbands who had woken up too late. But first, I had to protect the money. If she couldn't get the $50,000 from me, she would try to get it from the trust directly. She would try to forge documents. She would try to bypass me. I called my lawyer, Mr. Cohen. It was late, but he answered. "Avram," I said, "I need to lock down the trust. I need to make it so watertight that not even God himself can get $1 out without my thumbprint." "What is happening, Caleb?"
The Black Widow is spinning a web, Avram, and she is trying to catch a flight to the Alps. We have to ground the plane. I spent the rest of the night going over the trust documents. I added clauses. I added security measures. I made myself the insurmountable obstacle. But as I worked, a cold fear settled in my stomach. I had stopped them from leaving the country. I had stopped them from getting the money quickly. But I had also backed a dangerous animal into a corner. Victoria needed that money. She had killed for less before. If she couldn't get the money by pretending to cure Leo, she might decide to get the insurance money the old-fashioned way. She might decide that Leo was worth more dead right here in Chicago. I looked at the monitor. Leo was asleep. The window was closed. But I knew the peace wouldn't last. I had declared war. And Victoria Miller, or whatever her real name was, wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered. She would strike back. And when she did, it wouldn't be with a phone call. It would be with something much more lethal. I checked the load on my shotgun. I placed it by the door. "Come and get it, Victoria," I whispered. "Come and try to take him." I was ready. But I didn't know that the next blow wouldn't come at Leo. It would come at me. And it would come in the form of a dinner invitation that looked like a truce, but was actually a trap door. I knew that to catch a wolf, you have to offer it a lamb. In this case, the lamb was $5 million, and the wolf was sitting in my dining room wearing a cashmere sweater and a look of false concern. I had set the stage perfectly. My dining room table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rims that my late wife used only for Christmas. In the center of the table, right next to the roast beef, I had placed a thick leather folder. It was open just enough to reveal the title page of the document inside. It read, "Revocable Living Trust, Amendment Primary Beneficiaries, Trayvon and Victoria Jefferson." It was a forgery, of course. I had typed it up myself that morning, using legal stationery I had saved from decades of contracts. It was bait, pure and simple. But to a woman like Victoria, who saw the world through the lens of a calculator, it was irresistible. I had called Trayvon that afternoon. I made my voice sound thin and brittle, like dried leaves. I told him I was tired. I told him the fight had gone out of me. I told him that maybe he was right, and I was too old to manage such a large estate alone. I told him I wanted to make peace before the Swiss trip. They arrived at 7 sharp. Trayvon looked wary, his eyes darting around the room, as if expecting an ambush. He was a good man deep down, but he was being led by a leash he could not see. Victoria, however, walked in like she already owned the place. Her eyes went straight to the folder on the table. I saw her pupils dilate. It was a physical reaction. The scent of money was stronger to her than the smell of the roast beef. "Come in," I said, leaning heavily on my cane. "Thank you for coming. I know things have been difficult. We just want what is best for everyone," Caleb Victoria said. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. I shuffled to the table. I sat down slowly, making a show of adjusting my position, as if my joints were rusted shut. I saw Victoria glance at Trayvon, and then at the folder. She nudged him under the table. "So, Dad," Trayvon said, clearing his throat, "you said you wanted to talk about the trust." "I did." I sighed. I looked at the folder. "I have been thinking a lot about legacy, Trayvon, and about Leo. I cannot be the only one holding the keys. If something happens to me, the money gets tied up in probate. Leo cannot wait for that." Victoria leaned forward. Her predatory gaze was locked on my face. "So you are transferring control?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were gripping the napkin so tight her knuckles were white. "I am." I tapped the folder. "I drew up the papers this morning. I sent the originals to Mr. Cohen to file tomorrow. This is just the copy. According to this, as of midnight tonight, you two are the co-trustees.
You will have full access to the funds for Leo medical care. It was the lie that sealed the trap. By telling them the paperwork was already in motion, I made myself expendable. In her mind, the transfer was done. The money was theirs. I was just a loose end that was still breathing. We ate in a tense silence. I watched Victoria. She was vibrating with energy. She ate quickly, her eyes darting between me and the clock. She was doing the math. $5 million. No more obstacles. No more begging the old man for scraps. Trayvon was different. He looked guilty. He pushed his food around his plate. He knew on some level that this was a surrender, and it pained him to see his father give up. He didn't know he was watching a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Now came the test. I had been holding a small bottle of nitroglycerin pills in my pocket all evening. They were actually just breath mints I had swapped into an old prescription bottle, but they looked the part. I let out a soft groan. I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Dad?" Trayvon asked, looking up. I gripped my chest. I squeezed my eyes shut. I let out a wheezing gasp. "My chest," I whispered. "It is tight." Trayvon shot out of his chair. "Dad!" "Water," I gasped. "Get me water." Trayvon ran to the kitchen. His footsteps hammered against the floorboards. I was alone with Victoria. I slumped in my chair. I let my hands spasm. I pulled the pill bottle from my pocket. My fingers fumbled. I let the bottle slip. It hit the hardwood floor and rolled. It rolled right to Victoria's feet. I looked at her. I stretched out a trembling hand. "My pills," I choked out. "Victoria, please." This was it. This was the moment of truth. A human being, a person with a soul, would instinctively reach down. They would grab the medicine. They would try to save a life. Even a stranger would do it. Victoria did not move. She sat there perfectly still. She looked at the bottle resting against the heel of her designer shoe. Then she looked at me. Her face changed. The mask of the concerned daughter-in-law vanished. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated malice. Her eyes were bright with excitement. She was watching a building collapse, and she was enjoying the show. She leaned back in her chair. She crossed her legs. And then, with a casual, almost bored movement of her foot, she kicked the bottle. It slid across the floor. It spun under the heavy oak sofa, deep into the shadows where no one could reach it without getting on their hands and knees. "Oops," she whispered. Her voice was devoid of panic. It was mocking. "I cannot seem to reach them, Caleb." She looked me dead in the eye. She smiled. "Die," she mouthed silently. I stared at her. My heart was pounding, not from a heart attack, but from the sheer horror of what I was witnessing. She wasn't just passive. She was active in her cruelty. She wanted me dead right there on the rug, so she could step over my body and cash the check. Trayvon burst back into the room, a glass of water in his hand. "Dad here. Where are the pills?" "I dropped them," I wheezed, pointing a shaking finger at Victoria. Victoria jumped up, her face instantly transforming into a mask of panic. "Oh my God, Trayvon, he dropped them. I tried to catch them, but they rolled under the couch. I cannot reach them. Hurry, move the couch." She was screaming, pointing, directing the chaos while ensuring I wasted precious seconds. Trayvon dropped the water and ran to the heavy sofa, struggling to lift it. I stopped acting. I sat up straight. I took a deep breath. The wheezing stopped. The shaking stopped. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a second identical bottle. It is a good thing I said, my voice booming in the sudden silence, that I always carry a spare. I popped the breath mint into my mouth and crunched it loudly. Trayvon froze his hands still under the couch. He looked at me confused. "Dad?" I looked at Victoria. Her face had gone pale. The triumph had drained out of her, leaving only shock and a sudden dawning fear. She knew. She knew I had seen the kick. She knew I had tested her, and she had failed in the most spectacular way possible. "I feel much better now," I said, my voice cold as ice. Amazing how fast these things work. Victoria stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She couldn't say anything. She couldn't accuse me of faking it without admitting she had watched me die. Trayvon stood up, wiping his hands. "You scared me to death, Dad. Are you okay?" "I am fine, son." I looked at the folder on the table. I picked it up. I walked over to the fireplace. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked, her voice shrill. "I am rethinking things I said." I tossed the folder into the fire. The flames licked at the leather, curling the pages. "But the papers," Victoria shrieked. "You said you sent them to the lawyer." "I lied," I said. "I never sent anything. And after what I just saw, I never will." Trayvon looked between us, confused. "What did you see, Dad?" "Ask your wife," I said. "Ask her why she kicked my medicine under the couch instead of handing it to me." "That is a lie," Victoria screamed. "It was an accident. I was trying to stop it with my foot." "Get out," I said. "Get out of my house." Trayvon looked at me, then at Victoria. He saw the guilt on her face. He saw the panic, but he was weak. He grabbed her arm. "We are leaving," he said. "Come on, Victoria." They walked to the door. Victoria looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with hate. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Oh, I know," I said. "It is just starting." The door slammed shut. I stood there listening to their car engine fade into the distance. I walked to the study door. "You can come out now, Avram," I said. The door opened. Mr. Cohen, my lawyer and oldest friend, stepped out. He was holding a tablet. He had been watching the security feed from the cameras hidden in the dining room. "I got it all, Caleb," he said, his voice grim. "The kick, the delay, the look on her face. It is all in 4K resolution." "Is it enough?" I asked. "To prove attempted murder? Maybe not to a jury yet. It could be argued as panic. But to prove she is unfit to be a guardian, to prove she is a danger, absolutely. And combined with the rest of the file we are building, it is devastating." I looked at the fire where the fake trust documents were turning to ash. "She took the bait, Avram, and now she knows the money is gone. She is desperate. Desperate people make mistakes," Cohen said. "Desperate people also get violent," I replied. I checked the locks on the doors. I checked the feed from Leo room. He was safe for now. But I knew Victoria. I had seen the look in her eyes when she kicked that bottle. She had crossed a line. She had tried to kill me. And now that she knew I was the only thing standing between her and $5 million, she wouldn't wait for a heart attack. She would come for me. "Prepare the net, Avram," I said, staring into the fire. "The shark is hungry, and she is going to come back for a second bite." I touched the pocket where I kept my real medicine. My heart was heavy. My son was sleeping with a killer. My grandson was a hostage, and I was the target. But as I watched the embers glow, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. She had kicked the bottle. She had shown me her soul, and it was blacker than the bottom of the ocean. "I am ready for you, Victoria," I whispered to the empty room. "Come and try." I thought I had bought myself some time. That was my first mistake. I thought that by burning the fake trust documents in the fireplace, I had signaled to Victoria that the game had changed. I thought she would retreat to regroup and come up with a new legal strategy or a new way to manipulate Trayvon. I underestimated her desperation. I underestimated the rage of a woman who watches $5 million turn into ash before her eyes. I had taken away her easy payday. I had taken away the soft option. So she decided to take the hard option. She decided to stop waiting for nature to take its course and give it a push. It was Sunday morning. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I usually went to church, but today I needed to clear my head. I needed to work with my hands. I went down to the garage. It is a detached building behind the main house, a sanctuary of concrete and steel where I restore classic cars. It is the one place where I feel completely in control. Physics does not lie to you. Metal does not manipulate you. If a bolt is stripped, it is stripped. You fix it or you replace it. I was working on my 1968 Mustang. It is a beast of a car, heavy American steel. It needed a new starter motor. I pulled the car into the center of the bay. I lined up the hydraulic floor jack. It was a 3-ton professional-grade jack, the kind used in mechanic shops. I had bought it 5 years ago. I maintained it perfectly. I checked the seals. I checked the fluid levels. I am an engineer. I do not take risks with gravity. I pumped the handle. The car rose into the air smoothly. I slid the jack stands underneath as a secondary precaution, but I did not lower the car onto them yet. I needed to adjust the angle of the lift to get better access to the starter. I locked the hydraulic valve. The car hung suspended in the air, a dark metal cloud waiting to rain down. I grabbed my creeper and slid underneath. The air under the car was cool and smelled of oil and old gasoline. It was a smell that usually calmed me, but today the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. I felt exposed. I felt like I was lying in the mouth of a lion. I started to unbolt the starter. My wrench slipped. I cursed. The bolt was rusted tight. I needed a breaker bar. I needed more leverage. I slid out from under the car. I sat up on the creeper and rolled over to my tool chest. It was 6 feet away. I stood up. I rummaged through the drawer looking for the 18-inch bar. That was when I heard it. It wasn't a loud noise at first. It was a hiss, a high-pitched whine, like a tea kettle starting to boil. It was the sound of hydraulic fluid being forced through a microscopic opening under immense pressure. I turned around. I watched in slow motion as the handle of the jack began to rise on its own. The valve was failing. The pressure was releasing. There was a pop, a sound like a gunshot. Then gravity took over. The car did not float down. It slammed down. 2 tons of steel dropped 3 feet in a fraction of a second. The floor shook. The concrete cracked under the impact. The sound was deafening, a thunderclap of metal on metal that rang in my ears like a bomb blast. I stood there, the breaker bar frozen in my hand. I stared at the spot where my head had been 10 seconds ago. If I hadn't gone for that tool, if that bolt hadn't been rusted, if I had stayed under there for just a moment longer, my head would have been crushed like a melon. There would be no open casket. There would be no investigation. It would be a tragic accident, an old man crushed by his own hobby. A sad end for a retired engineer. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. The silence returned, heavier than before. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of survival. I wasn't dead. I was standing. I was breathing. I walked over to the car. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to move. I knelt down beside the jack. It was crushed under the frame of the Mustang. Hydraulic fluid was pooling on the concrete, a dark red puddle that looked too much like blood. I touched the fluid. It was warm. I looked at the release valve. This jack was rated for 3 tons. The Mustang weighed less than 2. It should not have failed. Mechanical failure happens, but catastrophic failure like this is rare, unless there is an external factor. I smelled something. Underneath the smell of oil and hydraulic fluid, there was something else, something sharp and acrid, a chemical smell that burned the inside of my nose. I leaned closer. I examined the seal around the main piston. The rubber O-ring was disintegrated. It hadn't blown out from pressure. It had melted. It was gooey and stringy, like chewing gum on a hot sidewalk. I wiped my finger on the metal casing near the valve. The paint was bubbling. I brought my finger to my nose and sniffed cautiously. Acid, not battery acid. This was something strong, something industrial, something that eats through rubber seals and weakens metal in a matter of hours. I looked at the side door of the garage. It was unlocked. I always locked it. I stood up and walked to the door. I examined the lock. There were no scratch marks, no signs of forced entry. But then I looked at the keypad. I had installed a digital lock years ago so Trevon could get in if he ever needed to borrow tools. He knew the code, and he had told her. This wasn't a random failure. This was a timed execution. Someone had come in here likely in the middle of the night. They had applied a corrosive agent to the seals of the jack. They knew I worked on the car on Sundays. They knew I would be under it. They set a timer made of chemistry and physics, and they waited for the boom. I looked back at the crushed creeper sticking out from under the car. The headrest was flattened. That was me. That was my life ended by a few drops of acid. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The fear vanished, replaced by a diamond-hard rage. She hadn't just tried to kill me. She had used my own sanctuary against me. She had turned my love for engineering into a weapon. She wanted a war. She wanted bodies. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I didn't call the police. The police would see an old jack and a tragic near miss. They wouldn't test the fluid for acid. They wouldn't fingerprint the door handle. They would write a report and leave. No, I needed her to know. I needed her to know that she had missed. I needed her to know that the ghost she was trying to create was actually a monster who was coming for her. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, Caleb." Her voice was bright, cheerful. She was expecting a call from a coroner. She was expecting a call from a grieving Trevon, telling her there had been a terrible accident. "Hello, Victoria," I said. My voice was low, the sound of gravel grinding together. "Oh, Caleb," she said. "I didn't expect to hear from you today. Is everything all right?" I looked at the crushed car. I looked at the bubbling paint on the jack. "Your mechanics are sloppy, Victoria," I said. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. The cheerfulness evaporated instantly. "I don't know what you were talking about," she said, but her voice had dropped an octave. It was flat, cold. "You used the wrong acid," I said. "It ate through the seal too fast. It gave way before I was fully under the car. You should have used hydrofluoric acid. It works slower. It leaves less of a smell. But I guess they don't teach you that in pharmacy school. Or maybe you just got lazy after the first 2 kids." I heard a sharp intake of breath. I had hit a nerve. I had mentioned the kids. I had let her know that I knew about Ethan and Sophie. "You are a crazy old man," she hissed. "You are imagining things. I am looking at a 2-ton car sitting on the spot where my head was supposed to be, Victoria, and I am smelling the chemical burn on the metal. You tried to crush me. You tried to squash me like a bug. You have no proof," she whispered. "No one will believe you. You are senile. You are paranoid. You are a danger to yourself." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I am just a crazy old man who got lucky. Or maybe I am the engineer who is going to dismantle your life piece by piece. Stay away from my family, Caleb. They are not your family," I roared into the phone, my rage finally breaking the surface. "They are your hostages, and I am coming to get them." I hung up. I threw the phone onto the workbench. It slid across the wood and hit the wall. The Cold War was over. There were no more polite dinners, no more fake smiles, no more pretending to keep the peace for Traven's sake. She had tried to murder me in my own home. I walked over to the wall where I kept my tools. I picked up a heavy pipe wrench. I weighed it in my hand. It was solid, real. I wasn't going to use it on her, not yet. But I was done playing defense. I went back into the house. I went to my safe. I pulled out the file Marcus had given me, the death certificates, the photos of the dead children. I needed to escalate. I needed to force her hand. If she was willing to kill me to get the money, she was willing to kill Leo to get the insurance. The clock was ticking louder than ever. I called Mr. Cohen. "Avram," I said, "we are moving to Phase 2. "Phase 2, Cohen asked. "What happened?" "The jack failed, Avram. It was melted with acid. She tried to drop a Mustang on me." "Dear God, Caleb. Are you hurt?" "No. But I am finished waiting. I want you to file the emergency custody petition. Today. Now. Use the footage from the bear. Use the background check. Use everything. It will start a firestorm, Caleb. Trayvon will fight you. He will hate you." "Let him hate me," I said, looking out the window at the gray Chicago sky. "Let him hate me for the rest of his life, as long as he has a life to live. And as long as Leo has a life to live." I hung up. I packed a bag. I couldn't stay here. The house wasn't safe. The garage wasn't safe. She knew where I slept. She knew where I ate. She had keys. I was going to ground. But before I disappeared, I was going to light a fuse. I sat down at my computer. I logged into the cloud server where I had uploaded the video of Victoria opening the window. I attached the file to an email. Subject, Leo, safety. Recipient, Trayvon Jefferson. I stared at the send button. This would destroy him. This would break his heart. It might break his mind. To see the woman he loved trying to freeze his son to death. But it was the only way to wake him up. I hit send. Then I grabbed my bag and my shotgun. I walked out the back door. I got into my truck. I didn't look back at the house I had built. It was just wood and brick now, a shell. The real home was where Leo was, and I was going to tear down the walls of the prison Victoria had built around him. I drove away, leaving the garage door open, the crushed jack visible, a monument to her failure. Next time, she wouldn't miss. But there wouldn't be a next time, because I was going to hunt her down before she could reload. I decided to become a ghost before I became a corpse. The acid in the garage had taught me a valuable lesson. Victoria was hunting a strong man, a man who could fight back, a man who could expose her. So I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. I decided to give her a broken, confused old man who was losing his grip on reality. It was the hardest role I ever had to play. I had to murder my own pride to save my grandson. It started at 3 in the morning. I sat in my darkened living room, a bottle of scotch open on the table to set the scene, though I hadn't taken a drop. I dialed Trayvon's number. I let it ring until he answered, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "Dad, it is 3 a.m. What is wrong?" I forced my voice to tremble. I pitched it up, making it sound thin and fearful. "Martha? Is that you?" "The roast is burning, Martha. You need to come home." There was a silence on the other end. Martha was my late wife. She had been dead for 10 years. "Dad," Trayvon whispered, the irritation vanishing, replaced by a cold dread. "Mom is gone. You know that." "She was just here," I rambled, letting a sob catch in my throat. "She was wearing that blue dress, the one she wore to the picnic. Where did she go, son? Why did she leave me in the dark?" I heard movement on the other end. I heard Victoria's voice, sharp and awake. "Give me the phone," she hissed. "Caleb?" she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Caleb, you are confused. Go back to bed." "She stole my keys," I shouted, injecting a note of paranoia into my voice. "The woman in the window. She stole my keys and she put poison in the gas tank." I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I sat there in the dark, my heart hammering. It felt like a betrayal of my wife's memory to use her name like a pawn in this game, but I knew she would understand. I was building a facade of dementia, brick by brick. I kept it up for 3 days. I called them at odd hours. I showed up at their house wearing mismatched shoes, claiming I was late for a job site that had closed 20 years ago. I let them see me talking to empty chairs. I watched Victoria closely. At first, she was suspicious. She watched me with those shark eyes, looking for the crack in the performance. But arrogance is a blinder. She wanted to believe I was weak. She wanted to believe her plan to drive me crazy was working faster than she anticipated. And when I peed myself sitting on their expensive white sofa, a humiliation that burned my soul but was necessary for the act, I saw the doubt vanish from her face. She smiled. She saw a man who was no longer a threat. She saw a man who was ready for the slaughterhouse. Then came the checkmate. I was at their house, sitting in the living room while Trayvon tried to clean up the mess I had intentionally made. I was muttering about the war, mixing up memories of Vietnam with construction projects from the 90s. Victoria walked in holding a stack of brochures. She didn't look at me with hate anymore. She looked at me like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be moved to the curb. "Trayvon," she said, her voice steady and reasonable, "we cannot do this anymore. Look at him. He is a danger to himself." "I am not going," I whined, clutching a throw pillow. "The spies are watching." "He is hallucinating, Trayvon," she continued, ignoring me completely. "What if he leaves the gas on? What if he tries to drive and kills someone? What if he hurts Leo?" Trayvon looked at me. He looked at the wet stain on the sofa. He looked at his wife. He was a man drowning in conflicting loyalties. "He is my dad, Victoria. I cannot just lock him away." "You have to choose," she said, dropping the hammer. "It is him or your son. He thinks people are poisoning him. He is paranoid. Paranoid people get violent. Do you want him to have an episode when he is alone with Leo? Do you want to come home and find your son hurt because your father thought he was a Viet Cong soldier?" She was using my own lies against me. It was brilliant. It was evil. Trayvon looked at me. "Dad, do you know who I am?" I looked at him blankly. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "You are the lieutenant," I whispered. "Did you bring the ammo?" Trayvon put his head in his hands and sobbed. It broke my heart to do this to him, but I needed him to sign those papers. I needed them to think I was neutralized. I needed them to focus on the logistics of moving me so they would stop watching their digital backs. "Call the place," Trayvon said, his voice muffled by his hands. "Do it today." Victoria beamed. It was a predatory, victorious grin. She walked over to the desk and pulled out a file. She had the papers ready. Of course she did. She had probably had them ready since the wedding. "I will handle everything, sweetie," she said, kissing the top of his head. "You just sign here. It is for his own good. It is to protect him." While they were huddled over the paperwork, debating which facility had the best security unit for dementia patients, I sat quietly on the sofa, rocking back and forth. But my mind was razor sharp. I was counting the seconds. I knew their routine. When Victoria was focused on a task, she got tunnel vision. She left things unguarded. Her laptop was sitting open on the coffee table in front of me. She had been using it to show Trayvon the brochures. I needed 5 minutes. "Trayvon," I said, my voice rising in panic. "I need water. My throat is on fire. The dust is choking me." Trayvon sighed. "I will get it, Dad." He walked to the kitchen. Victoria watched him go, then turned her attention back to the forms, filling out my social security number with greedy precision. I leaned forward. I was the crazy old man reaching for a magazine. But my hand went to the laptop. I minimized the browser window with the nursing home information. I needed her cloud account. I needed to know what she was hiding in the digital dark. I knew Trayvon used the same password for everything. It was his mother's birthday followed by his high school football jersey number. Martha 041288. He was sentimental, and he was lazy with security. I gambled that he had set up Victoria's devices, or that she, in her arrogance, hadn't bothered to change the shared family passwords. I clicked on the cloud icon. It asked for a password. My fingers flew across the keys. Martha 041288. Enter. The screen loaded. Access granted. I didn't exhale. I didn't smile. I went straight to the folders. I bypassed the photos. I bypassed the wedding planning. I went to a folder simply labeled Documents. Inside were subfolders: financials, medical, legal. I clicked on legal. There were dozens of files, but one stood out. It was a PDF file created just 24 hours ago. The file name was LJ_life_ins_policy_final.pdf. LJ. Leo Jefferson. I opened it. The document filled the screen. It was a life insurance policy from a company I had never heard of, one of those high-risk insurers that ask fewer questions if the premium is high enough. The insured, Leo Marcus Jefferson. Age, 8. The beneficiary, Victoria Jefferson. The coverage amount, $2 million. I scrolled down to the effective date. It was yesterday. The policy was active. The clock had started ticking. And then I saw the rider, the double indemnity clause. It paid out double in case of accidental death. $4 million if he died in an accident, like falling off a mountain in Switzerland, or freezing to death in a bedroom because a window was left open by mistake. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a plan, this was a contract. She had bet against my grandson's life. She had placed chips on the table, and she was waiting for the wheel to spin. I heard footsteps. Trayvon was coming back. I quickly closed the document. I cleared the recent history with 2 keystrokes. I minimized the window back to the nursing home brochure. I sat back. I started rocking again. Trayvon walked in with a glass of water. "Here, Dad, drink this." I took the glass with a shaking hand. I spilled half of it down my chin. "Thank you, Lieutenant," I mumbled. Victoria looked up from the papers. She smiled at me. It was the smile of a butcher looking at a prize hog. "Don't worry, Caleb," she said softly. "You are going to a nice place where you can't hurt anyone ever again. And we will take such good care of Leo. You won't have to worry about a thing." I looked at her. I looked into her blue eyes, and I saw the reflection of the $4 million she thought she was about to collect. "You are a good mother," I said, letting my voice drift into nonsense. "A real mother hen." She preened. She loved the compliment, even from a crazy man. I drank the water. It tasted like ash. I had the proof. I knew the timeline. She had activated the policy. She wasn't going to wait months. She wasn't going to wait for a trip to Europe. She was going to cash out now. They finished signing the papers. Trayvon looked like he had sold his soul. Victoria looked like she had just won the lottery. "We will take him tomorrow morning," Victoria said, closing the file. "Tonight we will keep him in the guest room. I will lock the door from the outside so he doesn't wander." Locking me in. Perfect. They led me to the guest room. It was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the backyard. Victoria locked the door. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I waited until I heard their footsteps retreat down the hall. I waited until the house was silent. Then I stood up. I walked to the window. I wasn't rocking anymore. I wasn't shaking. I was the structural engineer who had just found the blueprint to the demolition. She thought she had trapped a senile old man. She didn't know she had just locked a wolf in the sheep pen. I pulled out my burner phone, which I had taped to the inside of my thigh. I dialed Mr. Cohen. "Avram," I whispered. "Caleb? Where are you?" "I am inside the house. I am in the guest room." "My God. Did they hurt you?" "No. But Avram, listen to me. I accessed the cloud. And?" She took out a policy on Leo. "Yesterday. 2 million base. 4 million for accidental death." There was a silence on the line. Then Cohen swore. a harsh Hebrew curse. She is going to move fast, Caleb. Insurance fraud investigators look closely at claims made right after a policy starts. She needs it to look like a tragedy, not a hit. But she won't wait long. She is arrogant. She thinks I am crazy, Avram. I played the part. They signed the commitment papers. They think they have won. Then you have the element of surprise. What is the plan? I am going to take him, I said. Kidnapping. Caleb, that is a felony. You will go to prison. They will paint you as a lunatic who snatched a child. Let them, I said. I would rather be in prison than at a funeral. I am taking him tonight. But I need you to be ready. When they call the cops, and they will, I need you to meet us at the station. Bring the file. Bring the photos of the dead kids from Florida and Ohio. Bring everything. I will be there, Cohen said. Be careful, my friend. I hung up. I looked out the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the garden. I was 69 years old. My knees were bad. My back was stiff. But I looked at the drain pipe running down the side of the wall. It was sturdy, copper, bracketed into the brick every 2 feet. I had inspected it myself when the house was built. I knew its load-bearing capacity. I opened the window. The cold air hit me. It was time to stop acting and start moving. I wasn't Caleb the senile grandfather anymore. I was Caleb the soldier, and I was going behind enemy lines to extract the package. I climbed out onto the ledge. I grabbed the cold copper pipe. Hang on, Leo, I whispered into the wind. Grandpa is coming. And this time, I am not asking for permission. The next morning started with a lie so bright it blinded my son. Victoria stood in the kitchen making pancakes, looking for all the world like a mother who hadn't just signed a death warrant for her stepson. I was sitting at the table, drooling slightly into my oatmeal, playing the part of the confused geriatric to perfection. We should do something special, Victoria announced, flipping a pancake with a flourish. Before Caleb goes to the facility tomorrow. A farewell trip. A family memory. Trevon looked up from his coffee, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked at me with a mixture of guilt and relief. A trip? Where? The Grand Canyon, Victoria said. She said it casually, like she was suggesting a trip to the grocery store. I have always wanted to take Leo. The air is so fresh there. It would be good for his lungs. And the views are spectacular. I froze, my spoon hovering halfway to my mouth. The Grand Canyon. A mile-deep gash in the earth, a place where gravity is the only law that matters, a place where tourists fall to their deaths every single year, slipping on loose gravel or getting too close to the edge for a selfie. It was the perfect stage for a tragedy. No witnesses, just a tragic slip, a grieving stepmother, and a $4 million payout. Trevon hesitated. It is a long drive, Victoria, and with Dad in his condition. We won't take your dad, she said quickly, her hand resting on Trevon's shoulder. The transport service is coming for him tomorrow morning. We will leave him here with the nurse I hired for the day. This trip is for Leo. He needs to see something beautiful before everything changes. She looked at Leo. My grandson was sitting quietly, clutching the teddy bear I had given him. He looked terrified. He knew. Children have an instinct for danger that adults often lose. He knew he was being taken to a slaughterhouse. That sounds nice, Trevon said finally, the fight gone out of him. Leo would like that. I sat there, my mind racing. She was separating the herd. She was leaving me behind to be collected like trash, while she took my son and grandson to the edge of a cliff. If I did nothing, by tomorrow night, Leo would be a statistic, and I would be locked in a secure memory care unit, screaming a truth no one would believe. I couldn't call the police. I had played my role too well. To the world, I was a senile old man who thought he was still in the war. If I called 911 and said my daughter-in-law was planning to push my grandson off a cliff, they would send a psychiatric team, not a squad car. I had no hard proof of intent, just a pattern that only I could see. I had to handle this myself. I waited until they left the room to pack. I moved fast. I grabbed my bag from under the bed where I had stashed it. I climbed out the window, sliding down the drain pipe with an agility born of pure adrenaline. I didn't take my truck. They knew my truck. I took a cab to a shady used car lot on the edge of town, a place that dealt in cash and didn't ask questions. I bought a rusted beige RV from the 80s. It smelled like wet dog and stale tobacco, but the engine ran. It was the perfect cover. I wasn't Caleb Jefferson, the wealthy engineer. I was just another old drifter, invisible to the world. I stopped at a surplus store. I bought camouflage gear, binoculars, and a heavy wooden baseball bat. I didn't want a gun. A gun is loud. A gun leaves ballistics. A bat sends a message. I drove to the highway on-ramp that led west. I parked on the shoulder and waited. An hour later, Trayvon's sleek black SUV flew past. I pulled out behind them, keeping 3 cars between us. The hunt was on. We drove for hours. The landscape changed from the urban sprawl of Chicago to the flat plains of the Midwest, and finally to the red rocks of Arizona. I drank energy drinks and ate beef jerky, my eyes glued to their taillights. I watched them stop for gas. I watched Victoria buy snacks, laughing with the cashier, playing the part of the happy vacationer. I saw Leo in the back seat, his face pressed against the glass, looking like a prisoner in a transport van. They arrived at the Grand Canyon just as the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. They didn't go to the main tourist center with the railings and the crowds. Victoria directed them down a fire road, heading toward the North Rim. It was isolated. It was rugged. It was perfect for a murder. They set up camp in a clearing near the tree line. The canyon edge was only 50 yards away, a sudden drop into nothingness. I parked the RV a quarter-mile back, hidden behind a cluster of scrub oaks. I covered the windshield with a sunshade. To anyone passing by, it was just an empty vehicle. I grabbed my gear. I moved through the brush, low and quiet. The dry earth crunched softly under my boots. The air was thin and cold. I settled into a thicket of juniper bushes about 30 yards from their campsite. I raised my binoculars. Trayvon was struggling to set up a high-tech tent. Victoria was standing by the car, looking at the sunset. She wasn't helping him. She was checking her watch. "We need firewood," I heard her say. Her voice carried clearly in the still air. "Big logs, Trayvon. It is going to be a cold night." "There is plenty of wood right here," Trayvon said, gesturing to the ground. "No," Victoria insisted. "That is just brush. Go back to the trailhead. I saw some fallen logs there. Take the car." "But that is a mile back," Trayvon argued. "Just go, Trayvon," she snapped, her mask slipping for a second. "Do you want your son to freeze?" Trayvon sighed. He dropped the tent poles. "Fine. I will be right back." He got into the SUV. He started the engine and drove away, dust billowing behind him. He had left the sheep alone with the wolf. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment she had been planning for months. The sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the canyon floor. The light was fading fast. "Come on, Leo," Victoria said. Her voice changed instantly. It became sweet, cloying. "Let's go look at the view while Daddy is gone. It is so beautiful." Leo shook his head. He was clutching the bear I had given him. "No," he whispered. "I want to stay here." "Don't be a baby," Victoria said, grabbing his hand. She pulled him hard. He stumbled. "Come on. I want to get a picture of you on the edge, for your grandpa." She dragged him toward the precipice. I stood up in the bushes. I gripped the baseball bat until my knuckles turned white. I was 69 years old. My knees ached. My back was stiff. But as I watched that woman drag my screaming grandson toward a 1,000-foot drop, I felt a surge of power that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with rage. I didn't run. I stalked. I moved from tree to tree, closing the distance. She stopped about 3 feet from the edge. The canyon opened up before them, a vast, terrifying maw. The wind whipped Leo's hair. He was crying now, trying to pull away, digging his heels into the dirt. "Stand still," Victoria hissed. "Just stand right there on the rock. It will make a great photo." She positioned him. She turned him so his back was to the drop. She let go of his hand and took a step back, pulling her phone out of her pocket. "Back up a little more," she said. "The light isn't right. Just one more step, Leo." Leo shook his head, his eyes wide with terror. He looked past her, into the trees. He was looking for help. He was looking for his father. Instead, he saw me. I stepped out of the shadows. I was 10 feet away. I raised the bat. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to startle him. I didn't want him to step back in fear. Victoria didn't see me. She was focused on her prey. She put the phone back in her pocket. She looked around quickly to make sure they were alone. Then she reached out her hands. She wasn't reaching for a hug. Her palms were open, flat. She was preparing to shove him. "Goodbye, Leo," she whispered. She lunged, and I swung. The wind at the edge of the canyon was different from the wind in the city, because it carried the silence of a million years. It hissed through the juniper bushes and whipped my grandson hair across his face. I stood 10 feet away, hidden by the trunk of a twisted pine tree, gripping the handle of the baseball bat until my arthritis flared. I watched Victoria place her hands on Leo's shoulders. She did not cup them in a gesture of affection. Her palms were flat against his shoulder blades. Her fingers were spread wide to maximize the surface area for the shove. "Step back, Leo," she said, her voice carried by the wind. "Just one more step. The light is perfect right there." Leo was crying. His chest was hitching with the start of a panic attack. The lack of medication in his system meant his lungs were already tight, and the fear was closing his throat. He coughed a dry, hacking sound that rattled in his small chest. He tried to turn around to look at her, but she held him firm. "Don't move," she snapped. "Look at the sunset. Look at how far down it goes." I saw her muscles tensed. I saw her weight shift to her back foot, preparing for the thrust. She checked left then right one last time. We were alone. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was the perfect time for an accident. The shadows were long. Visibility was poor. She took a breath. I saw her elbows lock. I did not think about the consequences. I did not think about prison. I did not think about my son. I thought about physics. I calculated the distance, the velocity, and the angle. If I was a second too late, gravity would win. I lunged. I moved with a speed I did not know I still possessed. It was the desperate energy of a man watching his world teeter on a ledge. I swung the heavy wooden bat, not at her head, but at her arm. I aimed for the fulcrum point, the elbow that was about to extend and send my grandson into the abyss. The wood connected with bone. There was a sickening crack, a sound like a dry branch snapping under a boot. Victoria screamed. It was a primal shriek of pain and shock. She spun around, clutching her arm. The force of the blow broke her contact with Leo. He stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him toward the edge. I dropped the bat and dove. I hit the ground hard, sliding on the loose gravel. My hand shot out and grabbed the back of Leo's shirt. I dug my boots into the dirt, seeking purchase. I pulled with 40 years of construction strength. I yanked him back from the precipice. We rolled together into the dirt, away from the drop. I wrapped my arms around him, shielding his small body with my own. He was shaking violently, burying his face in my chest, sobbing into my coat. I looked up. Victoria was on her knees, 10 feet away. She was holding her arm. Her face was contorted, not with pain, but with a rage so pure it looked demonic. She looked at me, and she realized the game had changed. She realized I was not the senile old fool she thought she had left in Chicago. "You," she hissed. "You are supposed to be in a home." She scrambled to her feet. For a second I thought she was going to run. But she did not run. She looked toward the trail where Trayvon had gone. She heard the sound of the SUV engine in the distance returning with the firewood. Her expression shifted instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a mask of absolute terror. She reached up and clawed at her own face, dragging her nails down her cheeks until blood welled up. She grabbed the collar of her shirt and ripped it open, exposing her shoulder. She threw herself onto the ground and began to scream. "Help!" she shrieked, her voice piercing the canyon silence. "Trayvon, help me! He is killing us!" I stayed on the ground, holding Leo tight. I did not move. I did not try to stop her. I knew what she was doing. She was building a narrative. She was creating a crime scene where I was the aggressor and she was the victim. Daddy Leo whimpered. "It is okay, son," I whispered. "Grandpa is here. Do not look at her, just look at me." The SUV tires crunched on the gravel nearby. A car door slammed. Footsteps came pounding through the brush. Victoria Help screamed again, pitching her voice even higher. "He has a bat. He is crazy." Trayvon burst into the clearing. He stopped dead. He took in the scene with eyes wide with horror. He saw his wife on the ground bleeding and screaming. He saw his father holding his son in the dirt, a baseball bat lying nearby. He saw the red marks on Victoria's face. He drew the wrong conclusion. It was the conclusion she had engineered him to draw. "Dad," Trayvon roared. He did not ask questions. He did not hesitate. He launched himself at me. He was 30 years younger and full of righteous fury. He tackled me, knocking me away from Leo. My head hit the hard ground, and stars exploded in my vision. "Trayvon, stop!" I gasped, trying to shield my face. He punched me. His fist connected with my jaw. It was a solid hit. He was my son, and I had taught him how to throw a punch when he was 10 years old. Now he was using that lesson against me.
"Get off him," Trayvon screamed, hitting me again in the ribs. "Get away from my family, you psycho." I took the hits. I did not fight back. I curled up trying to protect my vital organs. I could hear Victoria sobbing in the background, spurring him on. "He tried to throw us off," she cried. "He jumped out of the bushes. He hit me with the bat, Trayvon. He broke my arm. Kill him, Trayvon, before he kills Leo." Trayvon raised his fist for a killing blow. His eyes were wild. He looked like a stranger. He looked like a man possessed by the need to protect his own. I had to end this. I had to break the spell. "Look up," I shouted, spitting blood. "Trayvon, look at the sky." He froze his fist, hovering inches from my face. He was panting, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "What?" he snarled. "Look up, boy," I wheezed, pointing a shaking finger toward the darkening sky above the canyon. He hesitated. Then slowly he lifted his head. Hovering 20 feet above us, silent and steady, was a black drone. Its 4 rotors spun in a blur. A single red light blinked on its underbelly like an unblinking eye. It was a high-end surveillance drone, the kind used by surveyors and security firms. I had launched it from the RV 10 minutes ago, setting it to hover and record on a loop. It saw everything I said. My voice raspy. "It is recording Trayvon. It is streaming to a cloud server." Trayvon stared at the drone. Then he looked down at me. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by confusion. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I pushed him off me. I sat up, wiping blood from my lip. My ribs screamed in protest, but I ignored them. I pointed at Victoria, who had gone suddenly silent. "Ask her," I said. "Ask her why she had Leo standing 3 inches from the edge. Ask her why she put her hands on his back. Ask her why she ripped her own shirt before you got here." "That is a lie," Victoria screamed, scrambling backward. "He is lying, Trayvon. He brought a drone to spy on us. He is a stalker. He attacked me. Look at my arm." Trayvon looked at her. Then he looked at the bat lying in the dirt. Then he looked at Leo. Leo was sitting up now. He wasn't crying anymore. He was staring at his father with a look of profound disappointment. "She hurt me, Daddy," Leo whispered. His voice was small, but in the silence of the canyon, it sounded like a thunderclap. "She tried to push me. Grandpa saved me." Victoria's face crumbled. The mask slipped completely. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a cornered rat. "He is brainwashed," she spat. The old man brainwashed him. Trayvon stood up slowly. He backed away from me. He backed away from her. He looked at the drone still hovering above us, its red eye judging us all. "Show me," Trayvon said. His voice was hollow. "Show me the video." I pulled the controller from my pocket. My hands were shaking, but I managed to land the drone. It touched down softly on a flat rock between us. I picked it up. I tapped the screen. I rewound the footage 2 minutes. I held the screen out to my son. "Watch," I said. "Watch your wife try to murder your son." Trayvon took the controller. He stared at the small screen. The video played in high definition. It showed the sunset. It showed Victoria dragging Leo to the edge. It showed her positioning him. And then it showed the moment her hands went flat against his back, the moment her muscles tensed. It showed me flying out of the bushes. It showed the bat hitting her arm just as she began to push. It showed the impact. It showed her ripping her own clothes. Trayvon watched it twice. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. The only sound was the wind in the canyon and the soft whir of the drone cooling fan. He lowered the screen. He looked at Victoria. His face was unrecognizable. The grief, the confusion, the love, it was all gone. In its place was a void, a black hole where his heart used to be. "You tried to kill him," he whispered. Victoria scrambled to her feet. She clutched her broken arm. "It is not what it looks like, Trayvon. The angle is bad. I was trying to catch him. He slipped." "Stop it," Trayvon said. His voice was quiet, deadly. "Just stop." He walked over to Leo. He picked him up.
He held him tight, burying his face in the boy's neck. He cried silent, shaking sobs. I stood up. I leaned on the bat for support. My body felt broken, but my spirit was soaring. I had done it. I had saved the boy. I had broken the spell. "We are leaving," I said. I started to walk toward the RV. Trayvon followed me, carrying Leo. He didn't look back at his wife. Victoria stood alone in the clearing. The sun had set. The shadows had swallowed her. "You cannot leave me here," she screamed. "I am hurt. My arm is broken. You cannot leave me." I stopped. I turned around. "You have a phone, Victoria," I said. "Call an ambulance. Or better yet, call a lawyer. You are going to need one." We walked away. We left her standing in the dark, screaming at the canyon, screaming at the drone, screaming at a world that had finally seen her for what she was. We got into the RV. I locked the doors. Trayvon sat on the bench seat, still holding Leo. He looked at me. His eye was swelling shut where I had hit him earlier in the scuffle, or maybe where he had hit himself in his grief. I couldn't tell. "Dad," he said. His voice broke. "I am so sorry." "Don't apologize," I said, starting the engine. "Just hold him. Hold him and don't let go." I put the RV in gear. We drove out of the canyon. We left the campsite behind. We left the tent. We left the luxury SUV. We left the life my son thought he had built. But the war wasn't over. Victoria was wounded, but she wasn't dead. A wounded predator is the most dangerous kind. She would come after us. She would use the law. She would use her injuries. She would use every trick in her book. But I had the video, and I had my son back. We drove through the night, heading back toward civilization, heading back toward the police station. I watched the headlights cut through the darkness. I am not done with you, Victoria, I thought. You broke my son's heart. You tried to break my grandson's body. Now I am going to break your life. And I am going to enjoy every single second of it. The glow of the drone controller screen illuminated my son's face in the gathering dusk of the canyon. It was a ghostly blue light that highlighted the sweat beading on his forehead and the terror widening his eyes. Trayvon stood there, frozen like a statue carved from salt, staring at the small, high-definition display. I had forced the device into his hands. I had forced him to look. On the screen, the scene played out in a loop. Victoria, the edge, the positioning of Leo's feet, and then the movement. It was undeniable. It was physics. Her arms drew back, her shoulders locked, and her weight shifted forward. It was the mechanics of a shove. It was the kinetic energy of murder. I watched Trayvon watch his wife try to kill his son. I waited for the rage. I waited for the scream. I waited for him to turn on her and unleash the fury of a father protecting his young. But the scream never came. Instead, he started shaking. His head shook back and forth, a violent tick of denial. He tapped the screen with a trembling finger, rewinding the footage again and again, desperate to find a different angle, desperate to find a version of reality where he had not married a monster. "No," he whispered. His voice was thin and reedy, like a child lost in the dark. "That is not right. The camera angle is weird, Dad. It is a trick of the light." I grabbed his shoulder, my fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his camping jacket. "Look at her elbows, Trayvon. Look at how she braces her feet. She was just fixing his coat," Trayvon stammered, his eyes darting around the clearing, looking anywhere but at me, anywhere but at the truth. There was dust on his shoulder. She was brushing it off. She was trying to keep him warm. You know how she worries about him getting cold. He was hallucinating. He was looking at attempted murder and seeing affection, because the alternative was too shattering to accept. If he accepted what he saw, he had to accept that he had let a predator into his bed. He had to accept that he had exposed his vulnerable son to a killer for months. His mind was snapping under the weight of his own guilt, so he chose blindness. "She loves him," Trayvon babbled, his voice rising in hysteria. "She makes him soup. She takes him to doctors. Why would she hurt him? You are crazy, Dad. You brought this drone here to frame her. You manipulated the video somehow. This is deep fake technology, isn't it? You hated her from the start, so you built this lie." I looked at my son. He was 32 years old. He was an architect. He built skyscrapers. He understood structure and stability. But standing there in the dirt, he was a ruin. He was collapsing in on himself, held together only by the mortar of his own delusions. He looked at Victoria, who was still on the ground, clutching her arm. And he looked at me, and I saw the decision forming in his eyes. He was going to choose the lie. He was going to choose her, because admitting the truth would destroy him. "It is a lie," he shouted, throwing the controller onto the ground. "It is all a lie." The controller cracked, but the screen stayed on, the loop playing on in the dust. Victoria winding up, Victoria pushing. I felt a coldness settle over me. It was the coldness of a surgeon who realizes the limb cannot be saved and must be amputated. I looked at Trayvon. I saw the weakness that had allowed this to happen. I saw the cowardice that had almost cost Leo his life. Words were not going to reach him. Logic was not going to reach him. He needed a shock to the system. He needed pain to wake him up from this nightmare. I stepped forward. I didn't wind up. I didn't telegraph the move. I just swung. My open hand connected with the side of his face with a sound like a pistol shot. It wasn't a tap. It wasn't a warning. It was a full-force slap, delivered with the weight of a man who spent 40 years swinging hammers and hauling steel. It was the physical manifestation of 30 years of disappointment. Trayvon's head snapped back. He stumbled, losing his footing on the loose gravel. He caught himself before he fell, his hand flying to his mouth. When he pulled it away, there was blood on his fingers. I had loosened a tooth. I had cut his lip. He stared at me in shock. I had never hit him. Not once. Not when he wrecked my car in high school. Not when he dropped out of his first college. I was a firm father, but I was never violent. "Are you awake now?" I roared, my voice echoing off the canyon walls. Trayvon spat blood into the dirt. "You hit me," he whispered. "I hit you because words were not working," I said, stepping into his space, forcing him to look at me. "I hit you because you are standing there, watching a video of your wife trying to murder your child, and you were talking about dust on a jacket. Are you a man, Trayvon, or are you a puppet?" He opened his mouth to argue, to defend her again, but I didn't let him. I reached inside my coat. I pulled out the folded packet of papers I had printed from the cloud. I had carried them against my chest like armor. "You want to talk about love?" I asked. "You want to talk about how much she cares?" I threw the papers at him. The wind caught them, scattering the white sheets against his chest. He instinctively grabbed them to keep them from blowing away. "Look at them," I commanded. "Read the numbers." Trayvon looked down. In the fading light, the bold black letters stood out stark and damning. Life insurance policy. Insured. Leo Jefferson. Beneficiary. Victoria Jefferson. He flipped the page. His eyes scanned the document. I saw the exact moment the words registered. I saw his eyes widen as he read the payout amount. $2 million. "Keep reading," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "Read the rider. Read the double indemnity clause." He turned the page. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. Accidental death. $4 million. The effective date was yesterday. He looked up at me. His face was pale, the blood on his lip a stark contrast to his ashen skin. "She took this out yesterday," he whispered. "She bet against his life, Trayvon," I said. "She didn't bring him here for the view. She brought him here to cash a check. $4 million for a slip on a rock. $4 million for a tragic accident in a remote location. She wasn't dusting his coat. She was pushing him toward her payday." Trayvon looked at the papers. Then he looked at Victoria. She was standing up now, cradling her broken arm. She had stopped screaming. She was watching us, her eyes darting between the papers and Trayvon's face. She knew the game was up. She knew the paper trail was the one thing she couldn't cry her way out of. "Trayvon," he said her name like it was a question, like he was begging her to have an answer. "Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't do this." Victoria's face hardened. The mask of the victim fell away completely. She stood up straighter. She looked at him with pure contempt. "We needed the money, Trayvon," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "You are broke. You owe everyone. Your father sits on millions and gives us nothing. I was doing what I had to do to save us." "Save us," Trayvon choked out. "By killing my son." "He was weak," she spat. "He is sick all the time. He drains our resources. We could have had a fresh start. We could have had our own children, healthy children. With $4 million, we could have been kings." Trayvon dropped the papers. He looked like he was going to be sick. The reality of who he had been sleeping with crashed down on him. He fell to his knees in the dirt, sobbing. Not the denial sobbing from before, but the gut-wrenching sound of a man whose soul has been ripped out. I watched him fall. I felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. I didn't have time for pity. The sun was gone, the canyon was dark, and we were miles from civilization with a woman who had nothing left to lose. Victoria looked at Trayvon weeping in the dust. She realized he was useless to her now. She realized the bridge was burned. Her eyes snapped to Leo. Leo was standing by my leg, clutching my pants. He was the only asset she had left. He was her leverage. If she had him, she could bargain. If she had him, she could still claim it was a kidnapping. She moved fast, faster than I expected for someone with a broken arm. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. "Leo," she screamed, lunging toward us. "Come to mommy." She wasn't limping anymore. She was sprinting. Her good hand was outstretched, claws hooked, ready to grab. I shoved Leo behind me. I stepped between them. But she didn't stop. She was feral. She was going to tear through me to get to him. She reached into her pocket. I saw the glint of metal, a pocket knife, the kind you use for cutting rope or slicing apples. I didn't hesitate. I reached into the duffel bag I had dropped at my feet. My hand closed around the cold steel of the stock. I pulled out the shotgun. I didn't aim it at the sky. I didn't fire a warning shot. I leveled the barrel squarely at her chest. I pumped the action. The sound was loud, mechanical, and final. Clack, clack. "Lame back," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was dead calm. Victoria froze. She was 5 feet away. She looked down the barrel of the gun. She looked at my finger on the trigger. She saw my eyes. She saw that I wasn't the kindly grandfather anymore. She saw a man who would pull the trigger and sleep like a baby afterwards. "You won't shoot me," she hissed. "You are a good man, Caleb. You don't kill people." "I am a grandfather first," I said. "And if you take one more step toward this boy, I will paint the canyon with you." She hesitated. The knife wavered in her hand. "Drop it," I commanded. She glared at me, hate radiating off her like heat. Slowly, she opened her hand. The knife fell into the dirt. I kept the gun trained on her center mass. I didn't blink. "I am taking him," I said. "I am taking Leo." "That is kidnapping," she screamed. "I will call the police. I will tell them you took him at gunpoint." "Call them," I said. "Tell them whatever you want. Tell them to meet me at the station. I will be the one with the video evidence of attempted murder. I will be the one with the insurance fraud documents. I will be the one with the hair sample from Leo that proves you have been poisoning him for months." Her eyes widened. She didn't know I knew about the poison. That was the final card. "Go ahead, Victoria," I challenged. "Call the cops. I am begging you." She took a step back. She looked at Trayvon still on his knees. She looked at the RV. She looked at the vast, empty darkness of the canyon. She realized she was trapped. I reached down with one hand and grabbed Leo's hand. I never took my eyes off her. I never lowered the gun. "Come on, Leo," I said. "We are going." We walked backward toward the RV. I kept the gun up. Victoria watched us go, a silhouette of rage in the twilight. Trayvon didn't move. He stayed on his knees, staring at the insurance papers scattered in the dirt. I opened the RV door. I lifted Leo inside. I climbed in after him and locked the door. I went to the driver's seat. I started the engine. I turned on the high beams. They illuminated the scene one last time. Victoria standing over Trayvon, screaming at him, kicking dirt at him, blaming him for her failure. Trayvon, broken and weeping. I put the RV in gear. I drove away. I left my son in the desert with the monster he had married. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but I had to save the part of the family that could still be saved. I looked in the rearview mirror. Leo was sitting at the table, clutching the bear, staring out the back window. "Where are we going, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice small. "We are going to a safe place, Leo," I said, "and we are going to make sure she never hurts you again." I drove into the night, leaving the canyon behind, but I knew the chase wasn't over. Victoria would find a way back. She would spin a story. She would play the victim. But this time, I was ready. I had the gun. I had the boy. And I had the truth. And I was driving straight to the only place where all three would matter: the police station. The flashing lights in my rearview mirror were not a surprise. They were an inevitability. Victoria had played her card, and now the state of Arizona was responding with full force. I saw the blockade ahead before I even slowed down. 3 patrol cars were parked across the highway, their lights painting the desert night in violent shades of red and blue. Officers stood behind their doors, guns drawn and leveled at my windshield. I was a 69-year-old black man driving a beat-up RV with a stolen child and a shotgun in the passenger seat. I knew exactly how this looked to them. I knew that one wrong move, one sudden twitch, would end with me bleeding out on the asphalt, while Victoria walked away with everything. I looked at Leo. He was curled up in the passenger seat, clutching the teddy bear, his eyes wide with a terror that no child should ever know. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Grandpa has to go outside now. The police are going to yell. They are going to be scary, but you have to be brave. Do not let them take you back to her. Do you understand? You tell them the truth." "I understand, Grandpa," Leo whispered. I put the RV in park. I turned off the engine. I threw the keys out the window so they would clatter on the road. I wanted them to know I was not running. I raised my hands high, pressing them against the glass. "Driver, exit the vehicle," the loudspeaker boomed. "Step out slowly with your hands in the air." I opened the door. The cold desert air hit me. I stepped down onto the road. The spotlights blinded me. I could not see the officers, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was a physical weight. "I am unarmed," I shouted, my voice cracking with the dust and the stress. "The gun is inside. I am surrendering. Get on the ground, now." I went down to my knees. The gravel dug into my skin. I interlaced my fingers behind my head. They rushed me. Heavy boots pounded the pavement. Rough hands grabbed my arms, twisting them behind my back. I felt the cold bite of the handcuffs. They slammed me against the side of the RV. They were not gentle. To them, I was a kidnapper, a monster who had snatched a boy from his grieving parents. "Where is the boy?" an officer screamed in my ear. "He is inside," I gasped, my face pressed against the metal. "He is safe. Please listen to me. Do not give him back to her. She is trying to kill him." "Shut up," the officer barked. "You have the right to remain silent." I twisted my head, trying to make eye contact with anyone. I saw a sergeant walking toward me. He looked older, experienced. "I demand to speak to your captain," I shouted. "My name is Caleb Jefferson. I am a structural engineer. I have evidence of attempted murder. You are making a mistake." The sergeant looked at me. He did not see an engineer. He saw a criminal. He saw a fugitive. "Get him in the car," he ordered. "Secure the boy." I watched helplessly as they brought Leo out. He was crying, reaching for me. "Grandpa!" he screamed. "I am here, Leo," I shouted back as they shoved me into the back of the cruiser. "I am fighting for you." They drove us to the station in silence. I sat in the cage, my mind racing. I had expected this. I had planned for this. But being in chains while the woman who tried to murder my grandson played the victim was a bitterness I could not swallow. I just hoped Cohen was close. I hoped the cavalry was coming. The interrogation room was a cold concrete box that smelled of stale coffee and fear. They chained my wrist to the table. I sat there alone for what felt like an hour. I knew what was happening outside. They were processing me. They were calling Victoria. They were setting the stage for her performance. The door opened. The sergeant walked in, but he was not alone. Victoria walked in behind him. She was a masterpiece of manipulation. She had her arm in a sling. Her hair was disheveled, just enough to suggest distress, but not enough to look messy. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving her looking pale and vulnerable. She looked at me, and then she looked at the sergeant, and she burst into tears. It was a performance that deserved an award. She collapsed into the metal chair opposite me, sobbing into a tissue. Her shoulders shook. She looked small. She looked fragile. She looked like the very picture of a mother whose heart had been broken. "Oh, thank God," she wept, her voice trembling. "Is Leo okay, Sergeant? Did he hurt him?" "The boy is fine, ma'am," the sergeant said, his voice softening as he spoke to her. "He is with Child Services in the other room. We are processing the paperwork to release him to you now." My blood ran cold. "To her," I interrupted, my voice booming in the small room. "You are giving him back to the woman who tried to push him off a cliff. Are you insane?" The sergeant slammed his hand on the table. "Quiet. You are in enough trouble, Jefferson." Victoria looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. She shrank back in her chair, as if my words were physical blows. "Why are you doing this, Caleb?" she sobbed. "Why do you hate me so much? I just wanted to take a family photo. I just wanted us to be happy." She turned to the sergeant, her eyes pleading. "He has dementia. We were going to put him in a home tomorrow. That is why he snapped." He attacked me with a baseball bat. He broke my arm. Then he took Leo at gunpoint. He kept screaming about poison and insurance money. He is paranoid, Sergeant. He is sick. It was the perfect narrative. It fit every piece of evidence they had seen. The bat, the broken arm, the gun, the abduction. It played into every bias in the room. Here was the sweet white mother, injured and terrified. And here was the angry, violent black man, ranting about conspiracies. I looked at the sergeant. I saw the look in his eyes. He had already made up his mind. He saw a predator and a victim, and I was not the victim. "He is dangerous," Victoria whispered. "Please, just let me take my son home. He has been through enough." The sergeant nodded. "We are charging you with kidnapping, aggravated assault, and child endangerment," the sergeant said to me. "You are going away for a long time, Mr. Jefferson." He stood up. He unclipped the keys to my cuffs from his belt. He wasn't unlocking me. He was getting ready to transport me to a cell. "Don't do it," I said, my voice low and desperate. "Check her background. Check the names Ethan and Sophie. Check the states of Ohio and Florida." Victoria flinched. It was microscopic, a tiny tightening of her jaw, but I saw it. The sergeant did not. "That is enough," the sergeant said. "Officer, bring the boy out so Mrs. Jefferson can take him." My heart stopped. If she took him now, she would disappear. She would cross the state line. She would finish what she started in the canyon, and she would blame it on the trauma of the kidnapping. She would win. "No," I shouted, struggling against the chains. "She will kill him. You are signing his death warrant." Victoria stood up. She wiped her eyes. She looked at me, and for a second the mask slipped. She smiled. A cold, victorious smirk that only I could see. "Goodbye, Caleb," she said softly. "I hope you get the help you need." She turned to the door. Her hand reached for the handle. She was seconds away from walking out with the prize. The handle turned, but it wasn't her turning it. The door swung open with force, slamming against the wall. Victoria jumped back, startled. A man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped into the room. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a small cardboard box in the other. He walked with the confidence of a man who owns every room he enters. Behind him stood two men in navy windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. It was Avram Cohen, my lawyer, my friend, my savior. "Nobody is going anywhere," Cohen said. His voice was calm, authoritative, and cold as ice. The sergeant stood up, his hand instinctively going to his belt. "Who are you? This is a restricted area." "I am Avram Cohen, attorney for Mr. Caleb Jefferson," Cohen said, placing the briefcase on the table. "And these gentlemen are special agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We are taking jurisdiction over this case." Victoria froze. Her hand dropped from the doorknob. She looked at the FBI agents, and the color drained from her face. The tears stopped instantly. The fragile mother act evaporated, replaced by the sharp-eyed wariness of a cornered animal. "Jurisdiction?" the sergeant asked, confused. "This is a state kidnapping case. It is an interstate insurance fraud and attempted murder case involving a serial offender," one of the agents said, stepping forward. "We have been tracking a woman matching this description across 3 states. We believe she is responsible for the deaths of 2 other minors." The room went silent. The sergeant looked from the agents to Victoria, who was now backing away toward the wall. Cohen walked over to the table. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at the sergeant. He placed the small cardboard box on the metal table between us. It was a simple white box, the kind used for medical samples. "You were about to release a child to this woman," Cohen said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You were about to hand the victim back to the executioner." "That is ridiculous," Victoria stammered, trying to rally her defenses, but her voice was thin and shaky. "I am his mother, stepmother. This man kidnapped him. He is crazy." Cohen opened the box. Inside was a sealed plastic evidence bag. It contained a lock of dark hair and a small vial of clear liquid. "Before anyone leaves this room," Cohen said, his eyes drilling into the sergeant, "I suggest you run a toxicology screen on this." "What is it?" the sergeant asked, looking at the bag. "It is a hair sample from Leo Jefferson, taken 3 days ago by his grandfather," Cohen said, "and a sample of the vitamin water his stepmother has been forcing him to drink. We had it analyzed by a private lab in Chicago before Caleb left. But I am sure your forensics team will want to verify the results themselves. Cohen paused. He turned his head slowly to look at Victoria. She was pressed against the wall, her chest heaving, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "It is not vitamins," Sergeant Cohen said. "It is arsenic." The silence in the interrogation room was heavy enough to crush a man. The FBI agent put on a pair of blue latex gloves and opened the small white box that Cohen had placed on the table. Inside was the vial of clear liquid I had stolen from my son's refrigerator 3 days ago. To the naked eye, it looked like water. To a mother, it looked like hydration. To me, it looked like a weapon. The agent took out a field testing kit. It was a simple setup: a test tube, a reagent solution, a strip of treated paper. I had seen similar kits used on construction sites to test for lead paint or asbestos. Science does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your tears or your alibis. Science only cares about the truth. The agent used a pipette to draw a few drops of the liquid from the vial. He dropped them into the test tube. Then, he added the reagent. He shook it once, twice, 3 times. We all watched. The sergeant leaned in his face inches from the glass. Victoria pressed her back against the cinder block wall, her eyes fixed on the tube with a mixture of terror and defiance. The liquid turned a bright, violent yellow. "Arsenic," the agent said, his voice flat. "High concentration, enough to kill a horse if given all at once, enough to kill an 8-year-old boy slowly over a few months. It mimics respiratory distress. It shuts down the organs one by one. It looks like a natural decline until the heart just stops." The sergeant recoiled as if the bottle had hissed at him. He looked at the yellow liquid, and then he looked at me. The handcuffs were still biting into my wrists. The realization washed over him. He had almost arrested the savior and released the executioner. "Uncuff him," the sergeant barked at the officer by the door. "Do it now." The officer scrambled to unlock my chains. I rubbed my wrists, feeling the blood flow back into my hands. I did not celebrate. I did not smile. I looked at Victoria. She wasn't looking at the test tube anymore. She was looking at the floor, her mind working at a fever pitch. The evidence was irrefutable. The DNA from the hair sample would match the poison in the water. She was trapped in a box of her own making. "This is a mistake," she whispered. Her voice was trembling, but it wasn't the tremble of fear anymore. It was the tremble of a predator calculating the next jump. "I didn't give him that. I give him vitamins. Someone must have tampered with it." Cohen stepped forward. He pulled a file from his briefcase. "We have the purchase records, Victoria," he said. "We have credit card statements from a shell company registered in your maiden name. You bought industrial-grade arsenic online 3 months ago. We have the shipping manifest. It was delivered to a P.O. box in Gary, Indiana, a box you visited once a week. We have surveillance photos of you picking up the packages." The photos hit the table. Victoria in a hoodie. Victoria wearing sunglasses. Victoria holding a package marked with a chemical hazard symbol. The sergeant looked at the photos. He looked at Victoria. His face hardened into stone. "You poisoned a child," he said, his voice thick with disgust. "You looked me in the eye and cried about your son while you were feeding him rat poison." Victoria let out a strangled sound. It was half sob, half scream. She looked around the room, realizing there was no way out. The FBI agents were blocking the door. The evidence was on the table. The game was over. Or so I thought. But a scorpion always has one last sting. Victoria straightened up. Her posture changed instantly. The slump of the grieving mother vanished. Her spine snapped straight. Her chin went up. Her eyes went dry. She looked at the sergeant, and her face twisted into a mask of pure, venomous hatred. "I did what I had to do," she screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at the door where they were holding Trayvon. "It was him. It was Trayvon. He made me do it." The room went silent. I stared at her. I knew she was evil, but I did not know she was this hollow. "He has gambling debts," she yelled, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "He owes sharks in Vegas. He owes sharks here in Chicago, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were going to kill him. They threatened to kill me. He begged me. He said it was the only way. He said his father wouldn't give him the money, so we had to get the insurance." She turned to me, her eyes wide and manic. "Caleb, listen to me. Your son is a monster. He forced me. He said if I didn't poison Leo, he would kill me. I was a hostage in my own home. I was trying to give him small doses, just to make him sick enough to get the money for treatment. But Trayvon wanted him dead. He wanted the 4 million. I listened to her lies, and I felt a cold pit open in my stomach. It was a brilliant pivot. It played on the bias. The successful black man with a secret vice. The innocent white woman forced into crime by a brute. She was trying to flip the narrative one last time. "Bring him in," the sergeant ordered. "Bring the husband in." 2 officers dragged Trayvon into the room. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His eyes were red. His clothes were dusty from the canyon. He looked at me, and he looked at the floor. He didn't look at Victoria. She pointed at him accusingly. "Tell them, Trayvon. Tell them you made me do it. Tell them about the debts. Tell them you threatened to break my neck if I didn't put the powder in his water." Trayvon stopped. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had defended against his own father. He heard her words. He heard her painting him as a gambling addict and a murderer to save her own skin. I saw something break in his eyes. It was the last thread of love he had for her. It snapped, audibly in the silence of the room. "I don't gamble," Trayvon whispered. "Liar!" Victoria shrieked. "You are a degenerate gambler. You lost our savings. That is why we are broke." Trayvon looked at me. His eyes were filled with a profound sorrow. "I am not a gambler, Dad. I am just stupid. I was blind. I let her handle the finances. I let her handle the mail. She told me the market crashed. She told me clients weren't paying. I believed her because I wanted to trust my wife." He reached into his pocket, the officers' tensed hands going to their holsters. "I have something," Trayvon said slowly. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked. It was the phone he had used to watch the drone footage in the canyon. "After you hit me, Dad," he said, looking at me. "After you took Leo, we were driving back. She thought I was on your side. She thought we were in it together because I didn't stop you. She started talking. She started planning the next move. She didn't know I hit record." He tapped the screen. He turned the volume up all the way. He placed the phone on the table next to the vial of arsenic. Victoria's voice filled the room. It wasn't the hysterical voice she was using now. It was calm, cold, calculating. "We have to move fast, Trayvon. The old man took the brat. That complicates things. But if we play it right, we can say he kidnapped him and killed him. We can still get the payout. But we need the old man gone too." The recording continued. Trayvon's voice was on the tape, sounding shaky and terrified. "You want to kill my dad? He is the only one who knows," Victoria's voice snapped. "He has to die, Trayvon. The old bastard should have died in the garage. I messed up the acid mixture, but next time I won't miss. Once he is dead, the trust fund unlocks. We get the 5 million plus the 4 million for Leo. We can go anywhere. We can be free." The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Victoria stood frozen. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. The lies about gambling, the lies about coercion, they all evaporated into thin air. Her own voice had convicted her. She had admitted to the botched murder attempt in the garage. She had admitted to the plan to kill me. She had admitted that it was all for the money. Trayvon looked at her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked dead inside. "I loved you," he said softly. "I gave you everything, and you were going to kill my father and my son, and then you were probably going to kill me too." Victoria's face crumbled. She looked at the FBI agents. She looked at the sergeant. She looked at the door. There was nowhere to run. The walls had closed in. She lunged, not at me, not at Trayvon. She lunged for the vial of arsenic on the table. She snatched it up before anyone could react. She tried to bring it to her mouth. She wanted to drink it. She wanted to take the easy way out. But the FBI agent was faster. He grabbed her wrist. He twisted it hard. She screamed and dropped the vial. It didn't break. It rolled across the table and stopped in front of me. I looked at the yellow liquid. Death in a bottle. "It is over, Victoria," I said. "You don't get to die. You have to live. You have to live in a cage and think about every breath my grandson takes that you couldn't steal." The agents handcuffed her. She didn't fight. She went limp. She was done. As they dragged her out, she didn't look at Trayvon. She didn't look at me. She looked at the empty air, muttering to herself. 4 million, she whispered. 4 million. Trayvon sank into a chair. He put his head on the table and wept. He wasn't a gambler. He wasn't a killer. He was just a man who had fallen in love with a mirage and woken up in a nightmare. I walked over to him, I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, expecting another blow. "It is done, son," I said. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of shame. "I almost let her kill him, Dad. I am sorry. I am so sorry." "I know," I said. "But sorry didn't fix the past. Sorry didn't put the years back. And sorry wasn't going to be enough to rebuild the foundation of this family. That was going to take concrete. It was going to take steel, and it was going to take a lot of hard work." I looked at Cohen. He nodded. He was already on the phone, arranging for Leo release from child services. We walked out of the interrogation room. I took a deep breath of the stale station air. It tasted like victory, but it also tasted like ash. I had won the war. But looking at my broken son, I knew the reconstruction was going to be harder than the battle. The gavel hit the woodblock with a sound like a gunshot, ending a long war. I sat in the front row of the gallery, holding Leo's hand as the judge delivered the verdict that would seal Victoria's fate forever. She stood in her orange jumpsuit, shackles around her wrists and ankles, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. The arrogance was gone. The beauty was gone. All that was left was the hollow shell of a woman who had tried to trade a child life for a payday. "Life without the possibility of parole," the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "for the attempted murder of a minor, for insurance fraud, for the calculated destruction of a family." Victoria did not scream. She did not cry. She just stared at the wall, her eyes dead and empty. She knew the game was over. There were no more husbands to charm, no more stepchildren to ensure. Just 4 concrete walls, and a lifetime to think about the $4 million she almost had. But the gavel banged again, and this time it was for my son. Trayvon stood up. He was not in handcuffs, but he looked like a prisoner all the same. He wore a cheap suit, his expensive clothes sold off long ago to pay for his defense. He looked at the judge with the desperate hope of a man who thinks that, because he did not pull the trigger, he is innocent. "Mr. Jefferson," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "you were not a co-conspirator in the legal sense. You did not buy the poison. You did not push your son. But your negligence was criminal. You allowed a predator into your home. You ignored the warning signs. You chose your wife over your child's safety, time and time again." Trayvon hung his head. "The court finds you unfit," the judge continued. "Your parental rights are hereby terminated, permanently. Full legal and physical custody of Leo Jefferson is awarded to his grandfather, Caleb Jefferson. You are granted supervised visitation once a month at the discretion of the guardian." Trayvon collapsed into his chair. A sound escaped him, a low animal whimper of pain. He looked back at me. He looked at Leo. Leo did not look back. He was busy drawing on a notepad, safe in the bubble I had built around him. I did not feel triumph. I felt a heavy stone settle in my gut. I had saved my grandson, but I had watched my son drown. It was a necessary casualty, but it still hurt. We left the courthouse. The reporters were gone. The circus had packed up. It was just me and Leo walking to my truck. I buckled him in. "We are going home, little man," I said. "Real home?" Leo asked. "Real home," I promised. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on my porch watching the sun go down over the city skyline. I was tired. My bones ached. But it was a good ache, the kind that comes from rebuilding a foundation. A car pulled up to the curb. It was a beat-up sedan, rusted at the wheel wells. Trayvon got out. He looked thinner. He looked older. He walked up the driveway, his shoulders slumped. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. He didn't come up. He knew better. "Hello, Dad," he said. "Hello, Trayvon. I heard about the trust," he said, looking at his shoes. "Cohen told me. You moved it." "I did," I said. "It is in a blind trust now. Leo gets it when he is 25. Until then, it pays for his school and his doctors. Not a penny goes to anyone else." Trayvon nodded. "I understand. Look, Dad, I am broke. I lost the house. I lost the firm. No one will hire an architect whose wife tried to kill his kid. My name is poison in this town." I took a sip of my iced tea. I waited. "I need help," he said, his voice cracking. "Just a loan. Enough to get a studio apartment. Enough to get back on my feet. I will pay you back, I swear. You know I am good for it." He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, the same eyes he used when he was 16 and wrecked the car. He expected me to cave. He expected the checkbook to come out because that is what I had always done. I had always paved the road for him. I stood up. I walked over to a box I had left by the door. I picked it up and walked down the steps. I stood in front of him. "I am not giving you a loan, Trevin," I said. His face fell. "Dad, please. I am living in my car." I held out the box. He took it automatically. He looked inside. It was a yellow hard hat, a pair of heavy leather work gloves, a high-visibility vest. "What is this?" he asked, confused. "I bought my old construction company back," I said. "We start a new project on Monday, a high-rise downtown. We need laborers." "Laborers?" he repeated. "Dad, I am an architect. I design buildings. I don't carry bricks." "You do now," I said. He stared at the hard hat. He looked insulted. He looked angry. "You want me to work construction? For you, not for me," I said. "For yourself. You want money, Trevin. You earn it. The site opens at 6 in the morning. If you are 1 minute late, don't bother clocking in. The starting pay is $15 an hour. It is honest work. It will put food in your stomach, and maybe, if you stick with it, it will put some spine in your back." He looked at me. He waited for the punchline. He waited for me to say I was joking and hand him a check for $10,000. But I just crossed my arms and waited. $15 an hour, he whispered. "I cannot live on that." "Then starve," I said, "or go to a shelter, or leave town. It is your choice. But the bank of Dad is closed. The only thing I have for you is a job. Take it or leave it." He stood there for a long time. He looked at the hard hat. He looked at his soft architect hands. He looked at the house he was no longer welcome in. Then he looked at me, and for the first time in his life I saw a spark of something real in his eyes. It wasn't gratitude. It was resentment. It was anger. But it was real. "I will be there," he said, his voice tight. 6 a.m., I reminded him. "Don't be late." He turned and walked back to his car. He threw the box in the passenger seat. He drove away. I watched him go. It was harsh. It was cruel. But it was the only way to save him. He had to learn that the world doesn't owe him a living. He had to learn to build something with his own sweat, not just his father's money. 6 months later, I took Leo fishing. We went to a small lake outside the city, a quiet place with still water and tall pines. It was early morning, the mist still clinging to the surface. Leo cast his line. He took a deep breath of the cool, damp air. He didn't cough. He didn't wheeze. Since the poison stopped, since Victoria left our lives, his asthma had all but vanished. He was growing. He was getting strong. The color was back in his cheeks. "Grandpa, look," Leo whispered, pointing across the lake. I looked. On the far bank there was a construction crew working on a new pier. They were hauling lumber, mixing concrete, driving piles into the mud. One of the men was tall and thin. He was wearing a yellow hard hat and a high-visibility vest. He was covered in mud. He was sweating. He was carrying 2 heavy bags of cement, one on each shoulder. It was Trevon. He stopped for a moment to wipe his brow. He looked across the lake. He saw us. He saw me sitting in my folding chair. He saw his son, standing healthy and strong by the water. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just nodded. It was a short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. Then he bent down, picked up a shovel, and went back to work. I smiled. "Who is that?" Leo asked. "That is your father," I said. "What is he doing?" "He is building something, Leo. He is building something real." I reeled in my line. The sun was rising, burning off the mist. The air was clean. My family was broken, yes, but we were healing. The rot was gone. The foundation was solid. I had saved the boy. And, watching the man shovel sand in the distance, I knew I might just save my son, too. It would take time. It would take sweat. It would take years of $15 an hour. But he was doing it, and that was the best payoff I could ever ask for. I learned that the most dangerous thing you can do for your children is make their lives too easy. I spent years shielding Trayvon from the world, and all I did was build a man who could not spot a wolf in sheep's clothing. True love is not about writing checks or smoothing the path. It is about teaching them how to walk over the rough ground themselves. We cannot build strong families on weak foundations of denial and easy money. Sometimes you have to let the structure collapse so you can rebuild it with steel, sweat, and the unshakable truth. Let me know in the comments if you would have given Trayvon a job or left him to fend for himself. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.